Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga. Chapter 2281. Going Too Far. Shifeng's voice echoed throughout the quiet meeting room for a long time. No one dared to question or complain about his presence. Even Nine Dragons' Emperor, who had wanted to silence the man, couldn't find the strength to open his mouth. While Shifeng might not have 100 bronze speedboats right now, he could produce them without a problem with the bronze speedboat design in his hand. Even if securing the necessary materials were a challenge, crafting the bronze speedboats would be much easier than questing or grinding powerful field bosses for them. With the necessary materials, one was guaranteed to obtain a bronze speedboat. In comparison, quests that awarded bronze speedboats were extremely rare, and their drop rate from field bosses was abysmally low. To the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, 100 bronze speedboats were immeasurably valuable. With another 100 bronze speedboats, the pavilion could instantly become a top-ranked superpower in the Sea of Death. Would the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion dare to slight Shifeng when he had such a card? Nine Dragons' Emperor was very familiar with the pavilion's upper echelons and elders, and God's domain only respected the strong. It was far more important to grow stronger as an individual, rather than rely on others. Blue Phoenix and her companions, who sat opposite of Nine Dragons' Emperor, only snapped out of their daze after losing themselves to the holographic projection. They immediately turned to Shifeng with an intense excitement in their eyes. Black Flame is too awesome. Big Sis Rain. Not even Starlink and Warblood support can help Nine Dragons' Emperor now, Blue Phoenix whispered to Phoenix Rain. Blue Phoenix had never thought that Shifeng would have such an amazing trump card. The Storm speedboat design was a priceless treasure that could strongly influence the status quo in the Sea of Death. If the Storm speedboat design hadn't been in Shifeng's bag space, essentially reducing its chances of dropping to zero, Blue Phoenix had no doubt that everyone in the room would have pounced on him. Don't get too excited. We still need to hear the great Pavilion Master and Guild Elders' thoughts on this. I don't think they would have chosen Nine Dragons' Emperor as the next great Pavilion Master so quickly simply because he's gained Starlink and Warblood support, Phoenix Rain quietly replied. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion wasn't as powerful as Starlink, and its naval strength was no match for Warblood. However, it was still a super first-rate guild. Moreover, the pavilion had been growing stronger recently. Hence, Nine Dragons' Emperor's alliance with Starlink and Warblood wasn't that surprising. If the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion wanted to, it could easily form alliances with various super guilds, let alone these two organizations. Ku Rong knew that. Phoenix Rain could only assume that Nine Dragons' Emperor had revealed some reason or item that forced Ku Rong to make such a hasty decision. There was also the fact that Cloudy Moon had joined them to show her support for Nine Dragons' Emperor. Cloudy Moon had never cared about who would become the next great pavilion master. The decision simply wouldn't affect her standing in the pavilion, especially since she'd reached the domain realm. Her position in the guild was practically unshakable. But not even the great pavilion master can ignore how tempting 100 bronze speedboats are, right? Blue Phoenix said. Phoenix Rain's statement had helped her realize how peculiar this meeting was, but she couldn't help her excitement. Shifeng had clearly stated that if Ku Rong chose Nine Dragons' Emperor as the next great pavilion master, the matter of the 100 bronze speedboats was moot. This was an opportunity for the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion to rise to the top out at sea. There was no way the offer wouldn't tempt Ku Rong. After the silence stretched on for a moment, Ku Rong, who hadn't said a word, finally spoke. Guild leader Black Flame, as an invited guest and the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's ally, of course, you qualify to express your opinions in this meeting. Since Martial Dragon was unaware of our rules, I ask that you forgive him, Ku Rong stated, giving Shifeng a friendly smile. The guild elders and upper echelons stared at their great pavilion master in astonishment. None of them had thought that Ku Rong would admonish Martial Dragon. Martial Dragon was Nine Dragons' Emperor's capable and trusted aide, as well as the commander of Nine Dragon Emperor's main force. He took care of the Heavenly Dragon Pavilion Master's normal affairs. As a domain realm expert, he was also a pillar of strength in the guild. Martial Dragon would know the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's rules more intimately than most people in the guild. Ku Rong's statement only proved how much he valued the 100 bronze speedboats. I see, so he didn't know of the rules. If that's the case, I can understand. Revealing a faint smile, Shifeng turned to Martial Dragon and said, Understood, 11 forgive him with an apology. Shifeng hadn't minded Martial Dragon's rudeness, But he wanted the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's elders and upper echelons to understand what Zero Wing was. Otherwise, these people continue to take his guild lightly, and they wouldn't recognize the significance of Zero Wing's alliance with Phoenix Rain. Martial Dragon had just made himself the best tool to get this point across. "Don't go overboard, Black Flame." Martial Dragon bellowed as veins popped across his forehead. The room's temperature dropped several degrees as his cold-killing intent swept toward Xueqi. Martial Dragon commanded the War Dragon Legion, the Heavenly Dragon Pavilion's main force. He was also a domain realm expert. Only the Great Pavilion Master, the guild founders, and the 2 pavilion masters held a higher position than he did in the guild. A public apology to Xueqi would ruin his reputation in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. He would not be able to show his face in the guild ever again. Even the pavilion's guild elders and upper echelons thought that Xueqi was going a little overboard. The Great Pavilion Master had taken a step back and acknowledged Xueqi's qualifications to express his opinion in this meeting. Yet Xueqi refused to let the matter rest, pushing the envelope. Even Ku Rong's expression darkened slightly. Phoenix Rain wanted to advise Xueqi against this tactic. Since Ku Rong had recognized Zero Wing's position, this meeting would likely conclude without a victor. There was no need to arouse everyone's disgust and aversion. But Xueqi didn't give her the chance. Going too far? Xueqi could not help but chuckle. Looking at Martial Dragon, his gaze turned cold as he said, "You know you've erred, yet you refuse to apologize. Do you think I, Black Flame, am a pushover? Or does the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion think that Zero Wing's guild leader is of no importance?" Xueqi then released his horrific aura, which spread throughout the room as if some primordial beast had woken from its slumber. Everyone in the room felt an immense pressure bear down on them, resulting from the considerable difference in life rating and basic attributes. This pressure felt even more powerful than that of a Grand Lord of the same level. Some of the Refinement Realm experts even felt their legs tremble. Fortunately, everyone was currently seated. Otherwise, many of them would have caved in, collapsing. Furthermore, Xueqi exposed his true level for all to see. Level 100. When they saw the eye-catching number, the room's occupants felt as if a mountain had fallen on their heads. Even Cloudy Moon, who sat beside the Heavenly Dragon Pavilion Master, stared at Xueqi in astonishment. Level 100. Phoenix Rain really knows how to take people by surprise. She actually recruited such a powerful ally. It's no wonder why she's remained calm throughout the meeting. Cloudy Moon glanced at Phoenix Rain, who in reality had gone stiff with shock, in admiration. After the commotion continued for a moment, Ku Rong, who had maintained his light smile, hesitated as he said, "Marshal, how about you just?" After giving the matter some thought, Ku Rong thought it was wisest to make Martial Dragon apologize for his earlier slight. Xueqi was Zero Wing's guild leader, and Martial Dragon had provoked him first. Suddenly, however, a rough voice echoed throughout the meeting room. "You really have a bad temper. Guild leader Black Flame. Commander Martial has merely misspoken, yet you're demanding an apology from one of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's pillars of strength. If I didn't know any better, I would have assumed you were the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's Great Pavilion Master." The rough, middle-aged man beside Nine Dragons Emperor spoke up, poking fun at Xueqi. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's upper echelons and elders nodded in agreement. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was a super first-rate guild, and Martial Dragon commanded one of its 2 main forces. He was a domain realm expert, a true pillar in the guild. Demanding a public apology was too much. This person certainly knows how to counter. Not only has he suppressed Black Flame, but he's also minimized the severity of Martial Dragon's insult. Phoenix Rain turned to the rough man as the guild upper echelons and elders began to discuss the situation amongst themselves. Phoenix Rain could tell that Xueqi was trying to improve the upper echelons and elders' opinion of Zero Wing. It would give her a better chance of undermining Nine Dragons Emperor and replacing him as the next Great Pavilion Master. However, this middle-aged man had elevated the conflict between Xueqi and Martial Dragon to one between Zero Wing and the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Now, even if the upper echelons and elders hadn't seen a problem with pushing Martial Dragon to apologize, they'd have to support Martial Dragon. If this insult concerned the guild's reputation, they couldn't afford to concede. "And you are?" Xueqi asked as he turned to the rough, middle-aged man. "Blood Oath, commander of the War Blood Adventurer team," the man responded, smiling faintly. The many guild upper echelons and elders that supported Nine Dragons Emperor mimicked the grin. Xueqi had only been allowed to act so arrogantly because he had an item that could tempt the pavilion, and martial dragon status wasn't as high as his. However, Blood Oath was a different story. Blood Oath commanded War Blood, the third-ranked adventurer team on Dragonheart Island. The adventurer team had just as many experts as the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, and its naval prowess was even slightly stronger than the pavilion's. Even Xueqi had to treat Blood Oath with respect, and now that he had spoken, Xueqi could no longer suppress Nine Dragons Emperor's position. "So you're War Blood's commander," Xueqi said nonchalantly. "Your adventurer team ambushed Commander Blue Phoenix's people in the Buried Bones ruin and nearly to her life. She's a friend of mine, you know. I had planned to seek you out, but since you're here, things have become a lot simpler. Compensate for the damage and apologize to my friend." As Xueqi finished speaking, a deathly silence descended upon the room again, and everyone turned to stare at him with stupefied expressions. Insane. He was insane. Chapter 2283. Power of Level 100, What is Black Flame trying to do? Is he trying to start a war? Is he insane? Doesn't he know who Blood Oath is? The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's upper echelons and elders couldn't bring themselves to look at Blood Oath. None of them had thought Xueqi would go so far as to provoke the man. Even Nine Dragons Emperor, who sat across from Phoenix Rain, stared at Xueqi in shock. They were all aware that Blood Oath had targeted Blue Phoenix. Xueqi, in particular, must have watched the battle multiple times, but what difference did that make? It was common for the various powers to attack their rivals in the fields. With War Blood supporting Nine Dragons Emperor, its assault against Phoenix Rain's aid wasn't unusual. However, there was a limit to how far the various powers would go. As long as they kept the situation in the dark, everyone involved would turn a blind eye. And yet, Xueqi had brought the attack into the light. He refused to conform, and because of this, the pavilions and War Blood's members wore ugly expressions. It would have been fine if Xueqi had simply insisted on an apology from Martial Dragon. He was, after all, a guild leader, while Martial Dragon was merely an upper echelon. It was understandable to expect Martial Dragon to apologize, but it was an entirely different story to demand an apology from Blood Oath. Setting aside War Blood's attack on Blue Phoenix, very few people on Dragonheart Island dared to disrespect Blood Oath. Even Xueqi feared the man in the Sea of Death. Yet, not only did Xueqi demand an apology from Blood Oath, but he also wanted Blood Oath to apologize to Blue Phoenix, not the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Not even Melancholy, 13 Thrones Guild leader, would dare to do such a thing. The meeting room was frighteningly silent, and the temperature seemed to drop steadily. Even the Void Realm experts in the room felt stifled, not to mention the Refinement Realm experts. Their reactions weren't a result of the powerful pressure in the room, but because the meeting room's atmosphere had become oppressive. They had no doubt that the slightest movement would spark a fight. After a long period of silence, Blood Oath opened his mouth and asked, "What if I refuse? What will you do about it?" Blood Oath's questions were simple and straightforward. Not only did his statement blatantly provoke Xueqi, the smile he wore and his frosty tone made the room feel even colder. Even the guild upper echelons around Phoenix Rain struggled to breathe, their vision fading. Their heartbeats grew increasingly louder as if their hearts would jump out of their chests. The killing intent and pressure they felt from Blood Oath was almost 10 times stronger than that of mythic monsters. Xueqi's expression twisted into something unpleasant. He had never thought that Xueqi would be this bold. Blood Oath was a murderous god in the Sea of Death. He didn't even respect Super Guild's guild leaders, let alone the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Trying to force a public apology out of this murderous god was suicidal. Even if Xueqi stepped forward to ease the tension, he'd be powerless to calm Blood Oath's fury. It's simple. Xueqi could not help his grin after hearing Blood Oath's statement. I'll just drag you over here to apologize. The room's occupants nearly collapsed with shock after listening to Xueqi's reply. They stared at him in astonishment, with no idea of what he was trying to accomplish. That was War Blood's commander they were talking about. As an individual, Blood Oath was the third-ranked berserker on Dragonheart Island. Not only did he wear 6 pieces of epic equipment, but he also wielded the magic dragon spear, a well-known magic weapon in the Sea of Death. Moreover, he had a special bloodline related to the sea god. He was basically invincible at sea. On top of that, at least one vice guild leader and 3 bodyguards were constantly by his side. Although the bodyguards couldn't rival domain realm experts, they had a mysterious item that allowed them to manifest a special domain. This domain could suppress their enemies in every aspect, as well as form a barrier around specific targets. This barrier could even withstand mythic monsters' attacks. Blood Oath was practically impossible to kill, much less capture.
Good. Very good.
Blood Oath laughed, his killing intent so intense that it even made Phoenix Rain shudder. It's been a long time since anybody has dared to joke with me in the Sea of Death. If you don't mind, Great Pavilion Master Ku Rong, I'd like to take Guild Leader Black Flame to Warblood's headquarters and teach him the rules on Dragonheart Island.
Ink Feather and Blood Oath's 3 bodyguards moved as soon as the words left their commander's mouth.
Dragonheart City's NPC soldiers would kill anyone who attacked another player within the city, but the guild residences, which were private property, were an exception. Players were free to do whatever they wished within their own guild residence.
Ku Rong's expression darkened when he heard Blood Oath's request. The commander might sound like he was asking for permission, but he was merely notifying the room of his intentions.
Each of Blood Oath's bodyguards retrieved a crystalline totem from their bags, sacrificing 1,000 magic crystals to the items. The crystalline totems then formed a domain that enveloped the meeting room, and everyone felt as if a weight had dropped on their shoulders. Not only had the domain reduced their basic attributes by 15%, but their physiques had also weakened by 20%. To make matters worse, the gravitational force they experienced had significantly increased, making movement inconvenient. The moment the domain took form, Ink Feather squeezed and shattered a deification crystal, forcibly upgrading herself to Tier 3. She then pulled multiple purple, crystalline arrows from her bag.
Many of the players in the room gasped when they saw the arrows.
Starburst arrows. These arrows had been created by an ancient civilization that had lived in the Gravity Mountain range. Each arrow contained incredible power and could elevate its user's attack by 1 tier to a maximum of Tier 4. Because of this, the Starburst arrows cost an exorbitant sum on the market. One could even trade 20 Starburst arrows for a piece of ordinary epic equipment. What truly surprised the meeting room's occupants was the act that Ink Feather had 12 of these arrows. Don't think that you're unstoppable just because you're level 100. I will ensure that you suffer the consequences for provoking war blood. Ink Feather said, her lips curling slightly as she glared at Xueqi. She pulled back the string of her ancient bow and activated the Tier 3 skill, Heart-Seeking Arrow. Heart-Seeking Arrow gave players full control over the arrow they fired during the skill's activation, and allowed the player to control a maximum of 36 arrows at once. Although Ink Feather couldn't yet control all 36 arrows, she'd have no problems controlling 12 with perfect precision. 12 Starburst arrows flew towards Xueqi, each with enough power to knock back a mythic monster. All 12 arrows could even instant kill a true Tier 3 player. Everyone in the room squeezed their eyes shut as the arrows flew. A level 100 player might be very strong, but not all fights in God's domain required a frontal confrontation. One could use tools to end a fight. However, just before the 12 arrows found their target, Xueqi brandished Killing Ray. Shadow Blade. Immediately, 12 sword lights flashed as Xueqi achieved a 100% completion rate with Shadow Blade. Each sword light slammed into one of Ink Feather's Starburst arrows, altering their trajectories. You have quite a bit of power behind your attacks. Unfortunately, raw power isn't enough to win all battles in God's domain, Xueqi said, glancing at the Starburst arrows as they brushed past him. Although he was not a Tier 3 player, the difference between a level 100 player and a lower-leveled player wasn't easy to make up. Xueqi then activated Windblade and charged at Blood Oath. Don't think I'll let you get close to the commander so easily. As Xueqi approached, the 3 bodyguards formed a barrier before Blood Oath, separating the two. In response, Xueqi swung Killing Ray again. Lightning Slash. A massive thunderbolt tore through the magic barrier, stupefying the bodyguards. At the same time, Blood Oath reacted, lifting his magic dragon spear to counterattack. Unfortunately, he wasn't fast enough to keep up with Xueqi, even with the domain suppressing the swordsman. Xueqi's twilight blade pushed aside the spear, and his sacred sword stopped right before it touched Blood Oath's throat. Less than 3 seconds had passed since Ink Feather had attacked. Chapter 2284. Confounding the venue. When Shufeng's killing ray stopped at Bloodoath's throat, astonished silence filled the meeting room, and not a single player could pull their eyes away from the sight. None of them could have dreamed that this meeting would turn out like this. Despite Warblood's vice guild leader and 3 bodyguards by his side, Bloodoath had ended up at the end of Shufeng's blade. Nobody would believe them even if they retold this tale to others. This is some trick, right? Bloodoath couldn't actually stop Black Flame? So strong. How high are Black Flame's basic attributes?
Even with a domain suppressing him, he still pushed away Bloodoath's 2-handed weapon so easily.
No. Black Flame's reaction speed is far more frightening than his basic attributes.
If it weren't, Bloodoath would have been able to use a defensive skill and wouldn't have had to rely on his weapon.
None of these players were ordinary experts. Some of them had even reached the Void Realm. Although Shufeng was very fast and imperceptible to the naked eye, his movement couldn't escape a Void Realm expert's notice. Thus, many of the room's occupants had caught a clear glimpse of what had just happened. Of course, witnessing that exchange was the very reason for their shock. The domain realm experts in the room evaluated Shufeng with a far more serious gaze than before. They had watched the recording of Shufeng killing Autumn Plant, and they had assumed the swordsman only had high basic attributes, combat techniques, and reaction speed. They had assumed that these factors were the only reason that Shufeng had been able to instant kill Autumn Plant. However, this display made it clear that they had been severely mistaken. The fluidity of Shufeng's movements was the true reason that he was so frightening. They had no doubt that even if Shufeng's basic attributes were on par with Bloodoath's, the result of this exchange would have been the same. If not even Bloodoath was a match for Shufeng, they, who were weaker than the Warblood's commander, had no hope against Zero Wing's guild leader. Stop messing around, Black Flame. Bloodoath is the Warblood Adventurer team's commander. Inkfeather coldly warned Shufeng, watching him hold Bloodoath captive. Shufeng's strength was far beyond her expectations. She had never expected an outcome like this. God's Domain was a virtual reality game that mimicked reality to a frightening degree. Although players could view details that weren't available in the real world, there was little difference between the two. Unlike monsters, players didn't have thick hides and powerful life forces, and because of that, players had to don armor to protect their vulnerable bodies. Even an ordinary Tier 2 player could deal an absurd amount of damage if they attacked Bloodoath's unprotected neck, not to mention Shufeng, who had incredible basic attributes and wielded an epic weapon. With Shufeng's blade against his throat, Bloodoath's life was in Shufeng's hands. Although a player would only lose 1 level if they died in God's Domain, the significance of 1 level differed from player to player. An ordinary expert would have no problem coming back from the loss. They couldn't catch up to God's Domain's frontline players, to begin with, and they weren't strong enough to contest for resources in new, unexplored maps. However, dying and losing a level was an immense loss to a frontline player like Bloodoath. With Inkfeather's warning, the meeting room fell silent again as everyone stared at Shufeng. Even Phoenix Rain was extraordinarily tense. Shufeng might have control of Bloodoath's life, showing off his strength before every player in the room, but he had also grievously offended the Warblood Adventurer team. For Warblood, allowing its commander to be taken captive in such a public setting was immensely embarrassing. To save its reputation from this blow, the adventurer team couldn't allow Shufeng to get away with this. You really know how to dig your own grave, Black Flame. I won't even need to lift a finger to deal with you now. As Lu Xinglua watched Shufeng, he silently celebrated the swordsman's folly. After all was said and done, Warblood's relationship with Starlink was only one of cooperation. Lu Xinglua didn't have the authority to command the adventurer team, but now that Shufeng had humiliated Warblood, the adventure team would find a variety of ways to kill the man. If Warblood were hell-bent on killing someone, even a super guild's guild leader would have a headache trying to stop the adventurer team. Messing around? Why would I be messing around? Shufeng laughed. I told Commander Bloodoath that if he's unwilling to apologize, I'll have to drag him to Commander Blue Phoenix and make him do it. Shufeng extended a hand to grip the back of Bloodoath's neck. Black Flame. Bloodoath understood what Shufeng intended the moment the swordsman moved. He immediately activated his berserk skill, disregarding the blade pressed against his throat. However, Bloodoath did not stop with just one berserk skill. Following which, he activated his legacy berserk skill,
the intensity of his aura instantly skyrocketing to the standard of a mythic monster of the same level.
Tier 2 Taboo Skill, Storm Rage. With the power to rip apart space itself, Blood Oath thrust his magic dragon spear at Xueqi. However, golden, divine runes began to appear across the swordsman's body, and his aura's intensity skyrocketed. Heavenly Dragon's Power. Xueqi then pulled back Killing Ray, swinging it at the incoming spear. Boom! The collision shockwave was so powerful that it threw the spectating players back against their chairs. The magic dragon spear, which had far more power than Inkfeather's starburst arrows, came to an abrupt halt, unable to harm Xueqi in the slightest. Blood Oath's expression darkened. He hadn't expected that, even after activating twofold Berserk, he'd still be helpless against Xueqi. He quickly activated another skill to put some distance between him and Xueqi. Unfortunately for Blood Oath, Xueqi was a step ahead. Tugging Killing Ray sharply, he dragged the magic dragon spear, and Blood Oath with it, forward. Taking advantage of the momentum, he snatched the back of Blood Oath's neck. Blood Oath had seen Xueqi's movements, yet he failed to react in time. The instant he felt Xueqi's hand on the back of his neck, Blood Oath felt as if a dragon had grabbed him. He couldn't move at all. Xueqi jumped into the air with his burden, dodging Inkfeather's attacks and landing before Blue Phoenix. He then tightened his grip on the back of Blood Oath's neck and pressed down. Boom! 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 Xueqi smashed Blood Oath's head into the ground 3 times, the marble floor shattering and shaking the meeting room with his strength. Blood Oath rapidly lost HP before it eventually hit 0. The scene even dumbfounded 9 Dragons Emperor and Lu Xinglua, not to mention the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's upper echelons and elders. Inkfeather, who had been preparing to launch another attack, was utterly dazed. As if time had stopped, everyone in the room froze. For a moment, they even forgot to breathe. Chapter 2285. Dragonheart shaken, Blood Oath's dead. How dare he? As they stared at Xueqi, everyone felt a chill crawl down their spines. He stood nonchalantly before the meeting table with Blood Oath at his feet, the man's head buried in the broken marble floor. Blood Oath's death didn't shock the meeting room's occupants overmuch. What truly shocked them was the method Xueqi had used to kill him. Xueqi had dragged Blood Oath to Blue Phoenix and forced Warblood's commander to kowtow and apologize. Not even 9 Dragons Emperor and Lu Xinglua had thought the swordsman would be so vicious, let alone Blue Phoenix. He's definitely crazy. Warblood definitely won't rest until Zero Wing is destroyed. 9 Dragons Emperor thought, flabbergasted as he watched Xueqi. Had Xueqi simply killed Blood Oath out of rage, Warblood would, at most, target Xueqi, but since the situation had devolved, the adventurer team would become a laughingstock if it didn't annihilate Zero Wing as a whole. Even the major corporations that supported Warblood would support their vengeance, and there would be no hope for reconciliation between the two organizations. In an era where every second mattered, 2 powers would suffer tremendous losses if they went to war against each other, regardless of who won in the end. Only a lunatic would start a war with a superpower like Warblood. You're dead, Black Flame. Our adventurer team won't let this matter rest. So what if you're strong? From this moment, Warblood declares war against Zero Wing. We will hunt Zero Wing's members relentlessly if they set foot in the Sea of Death. Inkfeather bellowed when she saw her commander's corpse with such powerful killing intent that even the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's members shuddered. It felt as if some hellish curse had echoed throughout the room. Inkfeather and Blood Oath's bodyguards stormed out of the room. Clearly, she intended to relay these events to Warblood's other upper echelons and prepare to move against Zero Wing. This is going to be troublesome. Phoenix Rain watched Inkfeather and her companions leave with a heavy expression. She felt that Xueqi had been too impulsive. Unlike on land, the status quo between adventurer teams and guilds had more balance in the Sea of Death. Naval travel was incredibly inconvenient, and because of this, guilds couldn't rely on their large armies. That wasn't the case for adventurer teams, however. Adventurer teams were small organizations that operated in multiple locations. Would be able to take out an adventurer team regardless of the provocation. Naval adventurer teams had many methods to deal with small groups of players, as well. This was especially true for an adventurer team like Warblood. As one of the top 10 adventurer teams on Dragonheart Island, many adventurer teams had subjected themselves to Warblood's rule. One word from Warblood was all it would take to ensure that Zero Wings members had no place in the Sea of Death. Moreover, Warblood had Starlink support. Starlink's progress in the ancient civilization's ruins in the Gravity Mountain range was impressive, and as a result, both the Guild and Warblood's naval prowess grew with each passing day. This was the reason Ku Rong had chosen Nine Dragons Emperor as his successor. In comparison, Zero Wing's naval strength was infantile. Even with the bronze speedboat design, Zero Wing would need a lot of time and materials to construct a full fleet. Furthermore, Adventurer Team supplied 80% of the naval resources on the market, and after today, not a single Adventurer Team would dare sell their resources to Zero Wing. With one of Zero Wing's main supply lines severed, Warblood and Starlink would occupy a large number of shops and resources in Dragonheart City by the time Zero Wing developed its naval forces. If they purchased Dragonheart City's large shipyard, they'd become unimaginably powerful at sea. How exactly was Zero Wing supposed to fight Warblood? Zero Wing wasn't even guaranteed to survive this war, let alone prosper in the Sea of Death. However, Phoenix Rain had to admit that Shurfeng's performance had been effective. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's upper echelons and elders had a newfound respect and fear of Zero Wing. Shurfeng had followed through with his threat of dragging Warblood's commander to Blue Phoenix and forcing him to apologize. Not even a Super Guild's guild leader would dare to pull such a stunt. For a time, everyone in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion re-evaluated their opinions of Phoenix Rain. Shurfeng might be a lunatic, but he was a powerful lunatic. Moreover, he had a bronze speedboat design. Because of this, Ku Rong decided to postpone the matter of his successor. At the very least, he'd wait to announce a decision until the war between Zero Wing and Warblood had reached a conclusion. Fortunately, this meant that Nine Dragons Emperor's plans had gone to waste. It seems Black Flame is quite capable after all, Cloudy Moon, who was about to leave the meeting room, said, smiling gently as she glanced at Shurfeng. His good luck will only last a short moment, Nine Dragons Emperor hissed with a sneer. You're new to the Sea of Death, so you might not understand what kind of power Warblood is. Not even Starlink is a match for the Adventurer Team's naval prowess, much less the Pavilion. Not only has Warblood secured a stable source of naval legacies, but it has also acquired a source for hidden bloodline legacies. It can nurture experts with horrific combat power at sea. Moreover, I've heard that Warblood has gained a large number of deification crystals and ancient contract scrolls that allow players to tame sea monsters as mounts due to its partnership with Starlink. Even 13 Thrones shows Warblood some respect at sea. Why else would the Great Pavilion Master choose me as his successor so quickly? Black Flame doesn't realize who he just provoked. He thinks everything will be fine just because he's so powerful as an individual. If Warblood goes all out, Dragonheart City will tremble at its might. There's no guarantee that Zero Wing will even be able to enter Dragonheart City, much less gain any standing. Nine Dragons Emperor's explanation surprised Cloudy Moon. She hadn't thought that an adventurer team could be so powerful, even having the ability to tame sea monsters as mounts. It was no wonder why Ku Rong had been so lenient about Blood Oath's disrespect and arrogance. Although her main activities were on land, she knew a little about sea monsters. With a sea monster as a mount, a player's combat power at sea would be impressive. If a power had enough sea monster mounts, it would usher in a new era in the Sea of Death. Despite the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's efforts to keep the incident quiet, news quickly reached Dragonheart City's various major powers. It caused an uproar in the city. Is Zero Wing trying to dig an early grave? This is going to be an interesting show. Meanwhile, Phoenix Rain worried as she read the report on Warblood's declaration of war in an office in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's Guild Hall. Guild leader Black Flame, I'm afraid that Warblood is already on the move. If you need any resources, I'll try to get you as many as I can from the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, Phoenix Rain offered, watching Shurfeng as he prepared to leave the office. Shurfeng had only started a war with Warblood on her behalf, so she couldn't just sit aside and do nothing, but she couldn't help but feel powerless with their opponent being the Warblood adventurer team. That's wonderful. In that case, I'd like to borrow some of your people, Shurfeng said, nodding. He wouldn't refuse the help. Zero Wing's foundations in Dragonheart City were just too fragile. Borrow some of my people? What are you planning? Shurfeng's request confused Phoenix Rain. I want to capture the Gravity Mountain Range's northern fortress, Shurfeng calmly stated. Chapter 2286. Size upgraded. Capture the northern fortress? Phoenix Rain stared at Xueqi with wide eyes. There were quite a few fortresses in the Gravity Mountain range, with over a dozen of varying sizes scattered across the map. The northern fortress was a medium fortress in the map's northern region, the largest in the area. Even working together, 13 Thrones and Starlink had gone to great lengths to capture a small fortress. While that might not seem like a great feat, they were the only superpower to capture a fortress in the Gravity Mountain range. And Xueqi intended to capture a medium fortress. No matter how Phoenix Rain considered the idea, she had little hope of the operation succeeding. Even if the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion and Zero Wing went all out, working together, their chances of capturing a small fortress were less than 10%. That's right. Zero Wing isn't quite strong enough to succeed, so I'd like to borrow 30,000 elites and experts for the operation, Xueqi said, nodding. Of course, I won't borrow them for free. If we succeed, I'll give you 20% of the fortress's shares. The majority of Zero Wing's forces were stationed in the Bottomless Abyss and/or Empire. There were barely any members in Dragonheart City. Although the guild could gather its members here, it would take a long time to do so, and he couldn't afford to wait. The main reason that the Gravity Mountain Range's fortresses were so difficult to capture was the level 100+ mythic monsters that guarded each of them. The fortresses were also full of level 100+ Great Lords and Grand Lords. Medium fortresses in particular were guarded by significantly more monsters, and these monsters operated like a well-trained army. Zero Wing hadn't previously had the strength to capture a medium fortress, but that had changed. While Xueqi had been in the Tower of Four Gods, both Anna and Kite had reached level 100 and completed their Tier 3 promotion quests. Including the level 100+ demons Xueqi could summon with the Bible of Darkness. Zero Wing qualified to challenge a medium fortress. It would be less risky to challenge a small fortress, but the northern fortress was near the Gravity Mountain Range's vein area. Not only could the rare ores in the area be used when crafting ships, but they would also be useful for producing level 100+ weapons and equipment. After level 100, the system reduced equipment drop rates even further. One would already be quite lucky to obtain a piece of mysterious iron equipment from a Great Lord, and Lord-ranked monsters had practically no chance of dropping level 100+ bronze equipment. Hence, demand for player-made weapons and equipment would skyrocket after level 100. Since no one was paying attention to the northern fortress, he had to secure it as quickly as possible. If he waited until this fortress attracted attention, not only would he have to deal with the monsters that guarded the northern fortress, but he'd also have to deal with player interference, which would significantly reduce his chances of capturing it. Is 30,000 enough? Phoenix Rain gave Xueqi a skeptical look. Although gathering 30,000 elites and experts on Dragonheart Island would be difficult, it wasn't impossible for her. However, 13 Thrones and Starlink had sent a massive, 150,000-player army to capture a small fortress, and over 70% of their forces had been slaughtered by the end of the battle. And yet, Xueqi only asked for a fraction of that. They'll be enough, but we'll need to move quickly, Xueqi said. The most important factor when attempting to capture a fortress in the Gravity Mountain Range was whether or not one could hold their ground against the monsters. If an army could stand strong, even 10,000 players would be enough to capture a fortress, not to mention 30,000. However, they would need a lot more time to succeed. That won't be a problem. I'll contact them immediately. I should be able to get 30,000 players here within a day, Phoenix Rain said. She knew that Xueqi was no fool. If he thought it was possible to capture a medium fortress, she had to take the risk. Starlink and 13 Thrones had gained massive advantages in Dragonheart City due to the small fortress they had captured. If she could get her hands on a medium fortress's shares, 9 Dragons Emperor would have an extremely difficult time shaking her position in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion in the future. Phoenix Rain and Blue Phoenix got to work contacting the necessary players. They called in the pavilion's various elite and expert players scattered in the Sea of Death and various countries on the main continent. Meanwhile, Xueqi headed toward the Wanderer's shop after leaving the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's residence. Since he had been stuck in the Tower of Four Gods, he hadn't been able to manage the Wanderer's shop, allowing it to operate itself. After so many days, the shop should have accumulated a fortune. According to Xueqi's estimates, his share should amount to at least 10,000 ancient gold. More customers had been visiting the shop, and as a result, its sales continued to improve.
especially those of the black market's entry slots. With 10,000 ancient gold, Xueqi could purchase a plot of land and construct an ordinary guild residence in Dragonheart City's outermost area. This would allow Zero Wings members to rest and recover in the residence for free, rather than waste their money on hotels. But as soon as Xueqi stepped out of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's residence, an uproar rose through the crowd outside. "He's out! And here I thought he would hide in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion for the rest of his life. I didn't expect him to show himself so soon. Keep an eye on him, everyone. The higher-ups have announced that we'll earn 3 pieces of epic equipment if we can kill Black Flame. Notify the boss. Black Flame has left the residence." By now, everyone had heard of Bloodoath's death, and Warblood's declaration of war had caused a sensation in Dragonheart City. Moreover, Warblood had offered the highest bounty ever seen in God's domain for Black Flame's head. 3 pieces of epic equipment. An ordinary player's strength would undergo a qualitative transformation if they acquired 3 pieces of epic equipment, let alone an expert's strength. Thus, every player in Dragonheart City was going mad over the news. Even if they had killed Xueqi before this, he wasn't guaranteed to drop his fragmented legendary item. But now, they were promised epic equipment if they killed the swordsman. Not a single player in the Sea of Death could ignore such temptation. Xueqi finally reached the Wanderer's shop after half an hour, utterly ignoring the crowd of experts and Warblood members that followed him. None of them would dare attack him in Dragonheart City. However, when he saw the Wanderer's shop, Xueqi had wondered if he had gone to the wrong place. The originally tattered Wanderer's shop looked completely different. Now, it was a 4-story tall building with an extravagantly decorated exterior. An endless stream of players entered and exited the building, and they were all level 85+ experts. The Wanderer's shop looked more like a guild hall than a shop. The shop size upgraded automatically? Xueqi could not help his shock. Just how popular is the Wanderer's shop right now? It wasn't particularly unusual for independent shops to upgrade automatically, but fulfilling the conditions for such an upgrade was immensely difficult. Not only did the shop require enough popularity and traffic, but it also needed to reach a certain sales volume. Xueqi entered the shop, only to find that the first-floor hall had more than doubled in size. There were also more than 100 types of items available for sale, and they were all treasures that were rarely seen on the market. However, Xueqi didn't pay these details much mind. He immediately opened the shop's interface to learn how much ancient gold he had earned. Is this real? Xueqi couldn't believe his eyes when he saw the numbers. 27,615 ancient gold. Chapter 2287. Special Area. Xueqi had earned a lot more ancient gold than he had expected from the Wanderer's shop. He still couldn't shake off the shock after staring at the numbers for a long time. It's no wonder why the powers that secured a Wanderer's shop in the past developed so rapidly. This shop is a gold mine. Realization dawned on Xueqi after seeing his share of the profits. Many first- and second-rate guilds had mingled in independent cities in Xueqi's previous life, and despite not occupying high-resource maps, they had established themselves among the many superpowers, with some eventually becoming superpowers themselves. Meanwhile, a large part of the reason for these guilds' success was likely the Wanderer's shops they had owned. Xueqi had only spent a little over 20 days in the Tower of 4 Gods, yet he had earned over 27,000 ancient gold through the Wanderer's shop. This meant that the shop generated more than 1,000 ancient gold per day. No shop in Dragonheart City earned as much income. Only the fortresses in the Gravity Mountain range could surpass the Wanderer's shop's profits. Moreover, the Wanderer's shop had earned so much income despite being a 2-star shop. Once he promoted it to 3-star status, the shop would sell items that would even tempt superpowers. Most importantly, the Wanderer's shop would undergo a qualitative transformation upon reaching 3-star status, periodically hosting a miniature black marketplace. The items available in this marketplace couldn't compare to those in the actual black market, but there were looser entry restrictions. Players could participate as long as they had the Wanderer's shop's customer membership. The Wanderer's shop's income would significantly increase. After withdrawing the 27,615 ancient gold, Xueqi made his way to the city hall. He had originally planned to construct a guild residence for Zero Wings members on Dragonheart Island, but since he had more ancient gold than he had expected, his plans had changed. Dragonheart City was split between its inner and outer areas, But there was also a special location within the city. It was the area closest to the World Tower. Not only did this special area provide more convenient access to the World Tower, but the mana density there was also incredible. Moreover, this secret area had a hidden secret: the World Power Tolerance value. As players roamed the World Tower's first underground floor, they might not notice a difference, sensing an ever-present malicious energy in the underground world. This malicious energy was world power, and it discriminated against and rejected all outsiders. Not only would this world power weaken players' physiques, but it would also interfere with their five senses, severely affecting their combat power. Of course, one could counter these negative effects by consuming the food and drink available in Dragonheart City, but doing so carried a high price. Even ordinary experts would blow through their savings if they relied on this method. However, after a long investigation, some players had discovered that one could reduce the world power suppression by resting in an area near the World Tower. It wouldn't make them immune to the world power's effects, but it could reduce them by half. With this reduction, players could continue to explore the World Tower without relying on Dragonheart City's expensive consumables. Because of this, the shops around the World Tower had been incredibly popular in the past. The various superpowers had spared no expense to purchase these shops, modifying them into hotels. If players had been allowed to construct guild residences in the area, such buildings would have surrounded the World Tower in the past. Even so, the area around the World Tower had become something of a famous tourist spot during Xueqi's previous life due to its many hotels. Unfortunately, first-rate guilds hadn't had a chance to build a hotel of their own. In fact, many superpowers had gone without, as well. There were only 34 plots of land around the World Tower, and these plot sizes were fixed. Guilds didn't have the option of expanding their hotels, regardless of their desire to do just that. Since none of Dragonheart City's various powers had figured this out yet, Xueqi couldn't miss this opportunity. When he had first visited Dragonheart City in search of a shop, he had only had 10,000 ancient gold on hand. It hadn't even been enough to purchase the shops in the city's outer area, much less those near the World Tower. Now that he had over 27,000 ancient gold, however, he should be able to afford a shop around the World Tower. After waiting for some time in one of the City Hall's second-floor reception rooms, Xueqi watched an elven beauty with a crescent moon insignia enter the room. Unlike the City Hall's ordinary administrators, this female elf was the City Hall's senior administrator and responsible for selling the shops around the World Tower. She was a level 180, Tier 4 Great Wizard. Ordinary players wouldn't even have the chance to meet and speak with this senior administrator, much less purchase the shops near the World Tower. Fortunately, Xueqi was a bronze legatee, so his rank was high enough to earn her attention. Lord Bronze Legatee, here's the information on the 34 shops around the World Tower. May I know which one you wish to purchase? Senior Administrator Irene Lauren asked. Xueqi fell speechless as he read down the list he had been given. Although he had known that these shops and lands would be very expensive, he hadn't expected them to cost this much. Even a barren plot of land cost 24,000 ancient gold, and it was a considerably small plot. A medium-sized plot of land cost 45,000 ancient gold, and of the lands that already had shops, the cheapest was a small-size, one-star restaurant, costing a total of 40,000 ancient gold. To purchase a medium-size, two-star hotel, Xueqi would have to pay a whopping 128,000 ancient gold. Suddenly, Xueqi felt like a pauper in Dragonheart City, even with the Wanderer's shop. I want this small-sized land, Xueqi said, gritting his teeth as he chose the small-sized plot closest to the World Tower. These shops and lands were no less rare than the Wanderer's shop. Not only could one earn a fortune though one of these plots of land, but it would also help accelerate a guild's growth. Very well. That will be 26,500 ancient gold coins, Irene Lauren said, nodding. Xueqi struggled with the decision as he handed the money over, leaving him with little over 1,000 ancient gold. Irene Lauren, however, didn't care about Xueqi's struggles, and as soon as she received the payment, she handed Xueqi an ancient contract. Xueqi felt his chest tighten for a moment when he saw the information on the contract. Although the plot of land had nothing on it, he was required to pay 10,000 ancient gold in monthly maintenance fees. The monthly fees were even more exorbitant than the Wanderer's shops. Forget it. You can't make money without losing money. Besides, the various superpowers in the past were willing to pay over 1 million ancient gold to purchase a plot near the World Tower. After giving the matter some thought, Xuefeng felt that he had still gained a huge advantage. Next, I'll have to collect 4,000 ancient gold to construct an advanced hotel. Then, I can open for business. After signing the contract and preparing to leave the city hall, Xuefeng received a call request. He answered the call as soon as he saw it was from Gentle Snow. Guild leader, we've arrived in Dragonheart City, Gentle Snow reported. Chapter 2288. Zero Wings Team. You guys sure are fast. Xuefeng was a little surprised to see Gentle Snow's smile so soon. He had only notified Gentle Snow and the others to travel to Dragonheart City a few hours ago. He hadn't expected them to reach the city so quickly. The tidal vortex was located in the Sea of Death's core region. Even with a flying mount, it would take some time to return to Dragonheart City. Furthermore, there were 100 players in Zero Wings' main force. Gentle Snow would need several trips to fly everyone back to the city. It would have taken a few more hours to get everyone back to Dragonheart City, but the last level 95 mythic boss we killed dropped a twin-headed flying dragon. Cola won the bid for the mount, and it substantially reduced our travel time, Gentle Snow said excitedly. She had already enjoyed the benefits of having a flying mount, and now that another Zero Wing main force member had won, the team's overall strength and leveling speed had significantly increased. A twin-headed flying dragon? Aren't you guys a little too lucky? That thing only has a 1% drop rate. The news stunned Xuefeng. The tidal vortex's mythic bosses did have a chance of dropping flying mounts. Grinding these bosses was one of the few ways players could obtain an extraordinary flying mount, but the 1% drop rate made it incredibly difficult. Xuefeng had never thought that Gentle Snow and her team would acquire one on their first trip. We have to thank Blackie's luck to thank for it, Gentle Snow said, smiling. Guild leader, I've heard that the Warblood Adventurer team has declared war on Zero Wing. Should we prepare for an offensive? Dealing with the Warblood Adventurer team would have likely given her a huge headache before they had explored the tidal vortex. But now, Cola had the twin-headed flying dragon, bringing Zero Wing's total to 3 flying mounts. Flying mounts already had a massive advantage at sea, and if 3 flying mounts worked together, their team could take on any fleet. 3 flying mounts could carry up to 60 players, and with such a force, annihilating players on 3 bronze speedboats wouldn't be a problem. Most fleets currently in the Sea of Death only had a few bronze speedboats. They could easily destroy any fleet's core combat power with a few rounds of attacks. Zero Wing might not be able to establish itself in the Sea of Death, but they wouldn't give the Warblood Adventurer team an easy time, either. No. Our current priority is to capture the Gravity Mountain Range's northern fortress, Xuefeng said, shaking his head. Make your way to the World Tower's entrance for now. I'll meet you there. Although they could rely on the flying mount's mobility to cause trouble for Warblood, doing so would slow their development speed. It wasn't a worthwhile trade. The struggle between powers required resources and experts. Securing the northern fortress was the best way to defeat Warblood. We're capturing a fortress? Xuefeng's statement stunned Gentle Snow, but after a moment, a grin spread across her face. Everyone on the team, including her and Cola, were eager to show Xuefeng how strong they had grown. All right, we'll head over immediately. Xuefeng then disconnected the call and made his way to the World Tower. World Tower's underground first floor. Due to Phoenix Rain's summons, a large number of Dragon Phoenix Pavilion experts had gathered near the first underground floor's entrance. Visiting players were shocked to see so many experts. Why are so many of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's experts here? Amazing! Even the lowest leveled player among them is level 86. Our adventurer team has several thousand members, but fewer than 10 have reached such a high level, yet the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion has more than 7,000 of them. That's nothing. Look at their equipment. They're all wearing level 85 equipment. Moreover, even the lowest quality piece is secret silver rank. Some of them even have level 85 dark gold equipment. I thought I've been doing quite well in my guild, but I only have a few pieces of level 85 secret silver equipment, while the rest is level 80 equipment. I wonder why the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion has gathered so many experts? Are they planning to complete a quest, maybe? The various players nearby couldn't help but wonder why so many of the pavilion's experts had gathered. They rarely saw so many in one place. Big Sis Rain, 9,000 people have arrived thus far. It'll take another 2 or 3 hours for the rest to get here, Blue Phoenix reported as Phoenix Rain examined the supplies she had prepared for the operation. Worriedly, she continued, however, 9 Dragons Emperor has found out about the operation.
So be it.
How could such a large-scale operation escape the notice of 9 Dragons Emperor's men?
Phoenix Rain nodded.
The news didn't affect her in the slightest. We just need to take down the northern fortress before 9 Dragons Emperor can gather enough players to do anything about it. It was too easy for information about such large-scale operations to reach other powers. There was no way to ensure that there weren't any spies among their people. Now they were in a race against time. Meanwhile, a report stating that Zero Wing and Phoenix Rain intended to capture the northern fortress sat on the guild leader's desk in 13 Thrones Dragonheart city residence. Black Flame never ceases to surprise me, Melancholy said, smiling at the report before him. He then turned to Happy Art and asked, Art, what do you think of this matter? His favorable opinion of Xueqi was the reason he had invited Zero Wing to participate in the mission to capture a small fortress. Unfortunately, he was forced to go back on his word. Zero Wing should have some confidence in succeeding, Happy Art said, uncertain. While capturing the northern fortress might be extremely challenging, she didn't think that Xueqi was foolhardy. Since he had decided to attempt the capture, he was confident of succeeding.
Confidence? Do you think capturing a fortress is so easy?
The masked woman beside Elder Wu commented disdainfully. In my opinion, this is simply the guild's death throes. It's run out of moves. After all, Black Flame so foolishly provoked war blood. 13 Thrones had gone all out, even cooperating with Starlink, to secure a small fortress. What, exactly, did Zero Wing have to rely on to capture the northern fortress, a medium fortress? Little Melancholy, are you planning to help this Zero Wing? Elder Wu, who sat quietly in a corner, asked.
I had considered it.
Zero Wing has a lot of potential. It could become a formidable ally in the future, Melancholy answered truthfully. He had no reason to hide his thoughts. More major corporations continued to invest in God's domain, and as a result, the competition between the game's powers grew more intense. Even a super guild like 13 Thrones would have to consider alliances if it wished to continue its smooth development in God's domain. Meanwhile, Zero Wing's development speed had been quite impressive. It was an optimal candidate as an ally. Moreover, if 13 Thrones lent aid during Zero Wing's time of need, the guild would have a more friendly view of 13 Thrones.
I understand what you're thinking.
That kid certainly knows how to get things done. But you need to understand that Warblood isn't the only power Zero Wing has provoked. Starlink is hell-bent to see the guild destroyed. If you help Zero Wing, our relationship with Starlink will become complicated, Elder Wu said calmly. Moreover, we already have plans to capture another fortress with Starlink, and the guild has something crucial for the siege. As 13 Thrones guild leader, you need to consider the guild's benefit carefully. With Elder Wu's warning, Melancholy had no choice but to dismiss the thought. Elder Wu was one of the 13 Thrones founders, and the old man had immense influence in the guild. He wasn't wrong either, and Melancholy didn't have a good enough reason to move against the old man's advice. While the various superpowers in Dragonheart City discussed the news, Xueqi and the rest of Zero Wing's main force arrived in the main hall of the World Tower's first underground floor. The instant Xueqi appeared, a commotion erupted throughout the hall.
Is Black Flame stupid?
He actually dares to visit the Gravity Mountain range. Doesn't he know how many experts want his head? He's probably betting on the fact that no one will mess with him with so many of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's members here. I guess you're right, but the moment he wanders off from the Pavilion's group, he's dead. The players in the main hall watched Xueqi with admiration and ridicule. They all wondered what the swordsman would do next. Once he left the main hall, he wouldn't have a safe zone to protect him. Many people would likely try to take his life to claim Warblood's bounty, and not even the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion could guarantee his safety. Guild leader Black Flame, over 23,000 of the 30,000 players you've requested have arrived. The rest should be here in another hour or so. How are the preparations on your side coming along? Phoenix Rain asked as Xueqi entered the main hall. Based on the information I've received, several thousand players are camped outside the main hall, all aiming for your life. Although they won't dare attack with so many of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's members around you, more people will gather as time passes. Once there are enough players, I can't be sure that they won't make a move. Completing this mission as quickly as possible was crucial. The various major powers experts were targeting Xueqi, and if the battle dragged on for too long, there was a high likelihood that other powers would try to interfere, and the operation would fail. All of my players have arrived already, Xueqi said, smiling as he gestured to Gentle Snow and the others behind him. A 100-man team? Phoenix Rain was stunned when she saw the cloaked figures of Gentle Snow and the rest of Zero Wing's main force. Although she had known that Zero Wing couldn't dispatch a lot of players for this operation, she hadn't expected Xueqi to only bring a 100-man team to capture the northern fortress. This had to be a joke. While Phoenix Rain was silent, Aqua Rose spoke up. These people dare to target you, guild leader. If we don't teach them a lesson, they'll likely think that Zero Wing is just a pushover, Aqua Rose coldly stated as she glanced at the players outside the main hall. That's right. We might as well take care of these fools since we're still waiting on some of the others. It'll save us some trouble, Cola insisted. All right, let's take care of them first, then, Xueqi agreed, nodding after giving the matter some thought. He did not want to deal with unceasing stalkers, either. They'd constantly pose a problem. You guys shouldn't mess around. Those aren't ordinary players. There are quite a few refinement realm experts among the group, including some experts from Dragonheart Island's top adventurer teams, Phoenix Rain interjected. Phoenix thought that Aqua Rose and her companions were insane. Naturally, Xueqi was even more mad to agree to the suggestion. Although Phoenix Rain was aware that Aqua Rose and the others were incredibly powerful, even her forces would have a hard time taking down these experts. Even if her forces won the battle, they'd suffer grievously for it. Furthermore, there were only 100 of these experts. As Phoenix Rain was about to continue, Aqua Rose and the other removed their black cloaks, revealing that every one of them had reached level 95 and 96. Chapter 2289, Zero Wing's Blade. The instant Aqua Rose and the others removed their black cloaks, the players in the hall, who had been busy talking about Xueqi, gasped in shock. They stared at Zero Wing's players as if they were horrifying monsters. Level 95. How is that possible? How are they so high-leveled? Haven't the superpowers peak experts just reached level 87? Are they monsters in disguise? Everyone was confused over Aqua Rose and her companions' levels. The fact that Xueqi had already reached level 100 was shocking enough. They all knew how difficult it was to level up from such a high level. The fact that Xueqi had reached level 100 wasn't entirely unbelievable. God's domain had many special opportunities to offer, and it wasn't strange for these opportunities to grant players tremendous amounts of EXP. Now, however, Zero Wing revealed that it had 100 players at level 95 and 96. How were they so powerful? After a brief moment of shock, a terrifying pressure washed over them. Even Phoenix Rain, who stood near Aqua Rose, shuddered, not to mention the ordinary experts in the room. After this display, Phoenix Rain gave up trying to dissuade Aqua Rose and her companions from attacking the group of hostile players. She could only smile bitterly about the situation. Just how many secrets does Zero Wing possess? This thought echoed in Phoenix Rain's mind for a long time. She couldn't understand how Xueqi had helped Aqua Rose and the rest of his main force level up so quickly. Of course, she also understood why Xueqi had so fearlessly provoked the War-Blood adventurer team in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's residence. Although Xueqi had previously revealed his level, there was a limit to how much an individual could accomplish, especially when exploring new maps. Xueqi could only secure so many resources by himself, and he could clear team dungeons alone, which were one of the largest resource sources for a guild. However, he wouldn't have that problem with a 100-man team that was almost as high-leveled as he was. After Aqua Rose and the other exposed their levels, many of the players in the hall that had considered targeting Xueqi abandoned the idea. Teams with fewer than 50 members, in particular, immediately abandoned their plans to move against Xueqi. If Xueqi were the only powerhouse they had to worry about, they could rely on special tools to restrain him, preventing him from exhibiting his full strength. But since such a group of high-leveled experts guarded him, what was the point in restraining Xueqi? They couldn't even get close to the swordsman, much less attack him. I hadn't thought that Zero Wing had hidden so much of its strength. Targeting Black Flame will no longer be possible. With so many high-leveled expert guards, even assassination experts will be powerless against him. That's right. I doubt Warblood expected Zero Wing to have a card like this. The adventurer team's plan to send everyone in the city after him is likely moot. That might not necessarily be the case. Small teams like ours might not have a chance, but those large adventurer teams could succeed. Zero Wing's members might be very high-leveled, but a team can bridge that gap by outnumbering them. With enough experts, the various adventurer teams might be able to suppress Zero Wing's members long enough to kill Black Flame. I guess you're right. Ordinary experts won't have high enough basic attributes to make a difference, but peak experts could do it if they rely on external items. Besides, even if they have high levels, it means nothing if their weapons and equipment can't keep up. I heard that the Heavenly Beast adventurer team has dispatched all of its experts to kill Black Flame and steal his fragmented legendary item. Heavenly Beast is quite famous among the Dark Forces. I don't think it's a match for Dragonheart Island's top 10 adventurer teams in an open battle, but its ability to kill individual players is likely even stronger than those adventurer teams. Heavenly Beast is powerful, but Black Flame is no fool. As long as he sticks with the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's army, Heavenly Beast's members won't get near him. At this point, only the various major powers have any hope of taking out Black Flame. Over 95% of the 4,000-plus experts that had planned to ambush Xueqi outside the main hall were dead in less than 15 minutes, while the rest tried to escape with special tools. The valley's ground was dyed red with blood, and weapons and equipment littered the ground. In contrast, Zero Wing's team hadn't lost a single player. They had only lost a little stamina and concentration. Chapter 2290. Fame spreads across Dragonheart. The various major powers experts, who had intended to follow Xueqi, came to a halt when they saw the remains of the army that had tried to ambush the swordsman. As if the main hall's exit were the entrance to hell, none of them dared to cross the threshold. They killed so many players so easily? Are they even human? This won't do. I need to report this to the boss immediately. They had assumed that Zero Wing wouldn't dare retaliate since they had such a massive numerical advantage. Hence, they had boldly followed after Xueqi, but seeing the thousands of corpses on the ground, none of the various major powers experts dared to leave the main hall. If Zero Wing's members could kill several thousand experts so effortlessly, then they, with only several hundred players, would only meet their doom by leaving. They needed to re-evaluate their plans. As long as Xueqi had Zero Wing's main force by his side, several thousand players wouldn't be enough to take him down. They would need, at least, an army of 10,000 players, perhaps even several tens of thousands, to take him down. Otherwise, they'd merely be giving their equipment to Zero Wing. However, Phoenix Rain was even more shocked by the results than the major powers experts. They've already obtained level 95 equipment. Phoenix Rain was no ordinary expert. Not only was she the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's Phoenix Pavilion Master, but she was also very nearly a domain realm expert. She could discern a lot of information that ordinary experts could not. Although Aqua Rose and the others had considerably high combat standards, their incredibly high basic attributes were a larger part of the reason for their overwhelming victory. The experts that had tried to ambush Xueqi weren't weaklings. Many of them were even experts from Dragonheart Island's various well-known and top adventurer teams. Their equipment standards were quite high, with even the weakest piece they wore at level 85 fine gold rank. If Aqua Rose and the others had worn level 90 dark gold equipment, they wouldn't have achieved such a one-sided victory. The only explanation was that Aqua Rose and her team wore level 95 fine gold equipment or better. Upgrading one's weapons and equipment was far harder than leveling up. A team could only raid team dungeons, obtaining weapons and equipment that corresponded to their levels, after reaching a high enough level. And although it was possible to grind for higher level weapons and equipment, the cost was so immense that it wasn't worth the effort. Most of the time, players' weapons and equipment couldn't keep up with their levels. In some cases, players would wear items that were of a far lower level. However, not only had Aqua Rose and her companions reached level 95 or higher, but their weapons and equipment were also level 95 fine gold rank or better. Their equipment standard was at least 2 realms higher than the various major powers experts. Meanwhile, news of the slaughter soon spread throughout Dragonheart Island. Zero Wing is amazing. Not even the various major powers will dare target Black Flame now. I know, right? I've heard that many adventurer teams have already given up the hunt. Warblood will likely have to act on its own to deal with Black Flame and Zero Wing. The various major powers had been shocked to learn that Zero Wing's main force members had reached level 95 and 96, but after hearing about the slaughter of several thousand experts in the Gravity Mountain range, that shock transformed into fear. Many of them had given up on Xueqi's fragmented legendary item after witnessing the incident. After this display, Zero Wing had proven that it could no longer be taken out by a few major powers working together. Even some of Dragonheart Island's ordinary superpowers grew wary of Zero Wing. Meanwhile, in one of the lounges of 13 Thrones Guild residents. Elder Wu, according to our estimates, Zero Wing's main force members should be wearing level 95 fine gold equipment. The masked, middle-aged man beside Elder Wu reported after examining the data a subordinate had sent him. Not even 13 Thrones could fully gear a 100-man team in such high-quality equipment. So, is this why that kid is so confident? Elder Wu muttered as he shut his eyes. Zero Wing is indeed impressive if it has such solid foundations. Unfortunately, Starlink's foundations are much sturdier. Notify our teams that we'll be raiding another fortress with Starlink soon. Have them prepare. Understood. I'll get it done immediately, the masked middle-aged man said, nodding. He then left the lounge. As Melancholy had said, Zero Wing was an excellent choice for an ally. But in God's domain, nothing was more important than resources. Securing a fortress in the Gravity Mountain range offered far more benefits than having a level 95,100-man team. While the various major powers discussed Zero Wing, Xueqi and his army had arrived at the Gravity Mountain Range's northern fortress. As the most important fortress in the Gravity Mountain Range's northern region, not only was the northern fortress situated at the top of a mountain range, which made it easy to defend, but it also had far more powerful defenses than a small fortress. Over 30 defense turrets and heavy ballistas had been lined up along the fortress's walls, and plenty of level 90+ Lord-ranked undead soldiers stood guard beside the war weapons. Not only were these undead soldiers Lord-ranked monsters, but they also had weapons and armor that had been enchanted with magic runes. These undead soldiers' defense and destructive power could even rival that of great lords of the same level. Guild leader Black Flame, for defensive magic towers have formed a magic barrier around the northern fortress. Do you have any ideas on how to take it down? Phoenix Rain asked with a grim expression as she read the scout's report. She had known that the northern fortress would be difficult to capture, but after seeing the details on the fortress's defenses, she finally understood how difficult it would be. Ignoring the number of undead monsters inside the fortress, her forces were incapable of overcoming the magic barrier around it. 4 defensive magic towers created that barrier, and not only did these towers have a massive reserve of mana, but they could also reform the magic barrier in a short time after it had been destroyed. Unless they could destroy the 4 defensive magic towers quickly after destroying the magic barrier, the fortress would gain another barrier. If they relied on Tier 4 magic scrolls and war weapons, they could destroy the northern fortress's magic barrier, but it would cost an astronomical number of resources to destroy the barrier once. It would also require a lot of time. By doing so, they'd risk losing their war weapons under the bombardment from the fortress's defense turrets and heavy ballistas. To make matters worse, all 4 defensive magic towers were located within the well-fortified fortress and protected by guardian bosses. Those guardian bosses were level 100+ mythic monsters. Simple. We just need to destroy the magic barrier as quickly as possible and charge into the fortress to destroy the defensive magic towers. Xueqi casually responded. Phoenix Rain stared at Xueqi, speechless. She knew that they could take down the barrier by destroying the towers, but how were they supposed to do that? This problem wasn't one that could be solved with enough players and war weapons. However, while Phoenix Rain racked her brain to come up with a plan, Xueqi took out the hero's tome and sacrificed 50,000 magic crystals to it. He then began to chant the summoning incantation. Chapter 2291. Tier 4 Hero. As Xueqi chanted the summoning incantation some distance below the northern fortress's mountain peak, a pillar of golden light rose from the ground beneath him, shooting toward the sky. The light pillar had a 400-yard radius and was even visible from several thousand yards away. Mana from across the mountainside surged toward the light pillar, condensing until it became liquid before Xueqi. After 20 seconds of this, the mana finally took on a humanoid form. A moment later, A knight in white clothing and carrying a sacred golden sword stood before the player army. Although this white-clad knight only stood 2 meters tall, nowhere near the size of a mythic monster, his appearance made everyone shudder. Arslet, Hero, Tier 4 Sword Saint. Level 120. HP 55, 000, 000/55, 000, 000. A Tier 4 hero? Phoenix Rain could not believe her eyes as she stared at Arslet. NPCs were originally already far more powerful than players. Only peak experts had any hope of defeating ordinary NPCs. Heroes, on the other hand, were peak combatants among NPCs, treated as kingdoms and empires' absolute pillars and protectors. They were treated as the absolute pillars and protectors of kingdoms and empires. She had suspected that Xueqi's trump card would be a Tier 4 combatant. A fighter of that power would be crucial when capturing a fortress, especially the well-fortified northern fortress. Current players simply didn't have the strength to succeed. Considering that Zero Wing had relied on the Tier 4 divine magic dragons in defensive and offensive sieges in the past, Phoenix Rain had assumed Xueqi would rely on one this time too. She had never expected Xueqi to summon a hero, and a Tier 4 hero at that. The NPC could single-handedly crush an entire NPC city. Xueqi had considered using a divine magic dragon, but the materials needed to summon one were incredibly rare and valuable. Collecting them would not be easy. Moreover, the divine magic dragons were only really useful against players. They wouldn't be particularly effective against monsters since monsters had such high basic attributes. They did not fear a frontal confrontation. Furthermore, the divine magic dragons had an obvious weakness: the players that managed the summoning array. If a single one of these players died, the array would quickly crumble. The mythic monsters that defended these fortresses generally had relatively high intellect. The moment they noticed the divine magic dragon summoning array, they'd do anything to destroy it. While Xueqi was confident of standing against an all-out assault from players, trying to stop powerful monsters hellbent on getting near the array would be impossible. When sieging a monster-protected fortress, very few players would rely on summoning arrays. He wouldn't have waited until now to capture a fortress in the Gravity Mountain range until now, otherwise. Phoenix Pavilion Master, have your men get ready, Xueqi said. Now that he had summoned Arslet, he couldn't afford to waste time. He continued, once the magic barrier is down, I want everyone to push into the fortress. Leave the mini-bosses to Zero Wing. Your team just needs to clear out the mobs inside and don't let them get close to the mini-bosses. All right, leave it to us, Phoenix Rain said, a trace of excitement flashing in her eyes. The bosses were the most troublesome aspect of sieging a fortress. If Arslet were merely an ordinary Tier 4 combatant, this upcoming battle would be a tough one. The Tier 4 bosses in the northern fortress were much stronger than ordinary Tier 4 monsters since their power was reinforced by the fortress's magic array. An ordinary Tier 4 combatant would be little more than a punching bag for the bosses. Bosses also had far higher intellect than ordinary monsters. They might not be as intelligent as players, but they weren't stupid. They would try to kill as many invaders as possible, rather than focus on one target. Unless one had enough strength to overwhelm the bosses, capturing the northern fortress was a pipe dream. This was why, even now, 13 Thrones and Starlink were the only powers to capture a fortress successfully. Fortunately, Xueqi's army had a Tier 4 hero, so suppressing the northern fortress's bosses shouldn't be a problem. As Phoenix Rain began to bark out orders, Xueqi sent Arslet after the magic barrier. The northern fortress's magic barrier was extraordinarily powerful. Even an ordinary Tier 4 combatant would have to attack for a long time to deplete its mana reserve. However, the magic barrier was incredibly fragile to Arslet. Once the hero struck it with his Tier 4 taboo skill, Spatial Rend, it shattered. When Phoenix Rain saw this, she was dumbfounded. She had never thought that a Tier 4 hero would be this formidable. Charge! Xueqi shouted. The outcome didn't faze him in the least. NPC heroes were considered invincible among those of the same tier, and they were the humans' final trump card against dragons. How could a measly medium fortress's defensive magic array sustain an attack from such a being? Hearing Xueqi's command, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's 30,000-strong army and Zero Wing's main force charged into the fortress. At the same time, the northern fortress's undead army spilled out of the fortress's entrance, while the undead soldiers on the walls began to attack the invading players. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's members, who had defeated plenty of powerful monsters before, couldn't help but shudder as they watched the undead army charge to meet them. Undead Soldier, Undead Lord. Level 94. HP 22,000, 000/22, 000, 000 Undead Captain, Undead, Great Lord, Level 96. HP 63, 000, 000/63, 000, 000 Undead Warrior, Undead, Grand Lord, Level 101. HP 260, 000, 000/260, 000, 000 Undead General, Undead, Mythic, Level 102. HP 580, 000, 000/580, 000, 000. Although most of the monsters leaving the fortress were undead soldiers and undead captains, the undead warriors and the general were quite eye-catching. These bosses' frightening auras were even more powerful than the grand lords and mythic monsters they typically faced. Why are there so many mini-bosses? Phoenix Rain's expression darkened when she saw the dozen or so massive undead warriors and the undead general. Dealing with the undead soldiers and captains was within the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's capabilities, but the undead warriors and the general were beyond them. There were more than a dozen undead warriors among the army and a single undead general. These were only the monsters stationed at the fortress's entrance, the weakest of the monsters within the northern fortress. Just getting into the fortress was likely impossible, much less capturing it. Not even a Tier 4 hero could stop the undead general and his dozen or so undead warriors at once. Guild leader Black Flame, the situation is direr than we expected. We should retreat, Phoenix Rain called out to Xueqi. There were more undead warriors protecting the northern fortress's entrance than their scouts had reported. To make matters worse, there was a mythic-ranked undead general among these monsters. The players would be at a severe disadvantage if they tried to face this undead army head-on. She was very familiar with just how powerful level 100+ monsters were. 13 Thrones had contained a lot of information regarding the fortress it had captured from ordinary guilds and powers, but hiding such details from superpowers like the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was impossible. One level 100 Great Lord could easily annihilate a 1,000-man legion of current players, not to mention level 100+ Grand Lords. Not even Tier 3 players had the strength to contend with these monsters. By the time Arslet defeated the undead general, the undead warriors would have wiped out half of their forces. As expected of the northern fortress, the force protecting its entrance is already so powerful. It's no wonder why the northern fortress had been the last captured in the Gravity Mountain range. The situation even surprised Xueqi. It seems I can't hide them any longer. Following which, Xueqi took out 2 summon guard scrolls and called forth Kite and Anna. Chapter 2292. One-Man Army. He's summoning his personal guards? Phoenix Rain watched Xueqi, a little surprised. Personal guards were powerful beings, but unlike players, they were incredibly difficult to resurrect. Thus, the various powers avoided risking their personal guards and would never use them to siege a fortress. And with how powerful this undead army was, what could a few personal guards possibly accomplish? 2 figures appeared before Xueqi, a man carrying 2 long swords, and a woman in luxurious purple-gold robes with a staff. The instant these NPCs appeared, all of the mana within 50 yards began to gather toward them. Is this for real? Both of those personal guards are over level 100. Even the strongest personal guard in our guild is only level 96. Crap. Those personal guards are actually Tier 3 NPCs. When they saw Anna and Kite, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's members gasped, feeling a little jealous. Xueqi's 2 Tier 3 personal guards shocked them even more than the Tier 4 hero had. Xueqi had relied on a special tool to summon the Tier 4 hero, which meant he couldn't casually summon the NPC, but that wasn't the case for personal guards. So long as the personal guards in question were alive, he could summon them at any time, and he could continue to nurture them, growing their strengths. There was also the fact that completing the Tier 3 promotion quests wasn't easy for personal guards. Although personal guards could reach Tier 3, they couldn't necessarily be promoted as soon as they hit level 100. Like players, personal guards had to complete a promotion quest, But the promotion quests for these NPCs were actually easier than the ones players had to face. Personal guards could complete their Tier 3 promotion quests in a short time. Bronze guards only had a 20% chance of clearing their Tier 3 promotion quests, and if they failed, they'd have to wait 7 days before challenging the quest again. Without enough luck, it was practically impossible for a bronze guard to complete their promotion quest as soon as they reached level 100. Fine gold guards, on the other hand, had a 50% success rate. Once a personal guard reached Tier 3, they'd be significantly more helpful to their player. Personal guards were NPCs and considerably more powerful than Tier 3 players. With a Tier 3 personal guard, a player would have an easier time grinding, questing, and raiding field bosses. This was why the various powers desperately nurtured their personal guards while protecting them from harm as much as possible. Now that they had seen Xueqi's 2 Tier 3 personal guards, these players couldn't even imagine how fast Xueqi would develop in the future. Phoenix Rain couldn't help but feel a little envious. With 2 Tier 3 personal guards, Xueqi could explore level 100 neutral maps immediately and start preparing for his Tier 3 promotion quest. However, the 2 Tier 3 personal guards did nothing to alter their current predicament. There were still over a dozen Grand Lord-ranked undead warriors to contend with. While the rest of the pavilion's members worried about the same issue, Xueqi commanded Anna and Kite to distract the undead warriors. The level 102 Anna and level 101 Kite then charged at the 15 approaching Grand Lords. Black Flame has gone insane. Big Sis Rain. Blue Phoenix watched the scene with wide, shocked eyes. Sending 2 Tier 3 personal guards against 15 undead warriors was suicidal. Tier 3 personal guards were exceedingly valuable. If they died in battle, resurrecting them would cost tens of thousands of gold. Blue, get ready to use our Tier 3 summoning scrolls and magic arrays. Phoenix Rain hadn't thought that Xueqi would be so maddeningly bold, either. She had no choice but to rely on the Tier 3 summoning scrolls and magic arrays she had prepared. Great Lord-ranked summon creatures wouldn't be a match for the undead warriors, but with their high HP, they should last for some time. If they included the magic array's suppression, the summoned creatures could survive even longer. However, as Phoenix Rain finished her command, Anna, who had reached the undead army, began to chant an incantation, swinging her staff gracefully. Under her command, 18 magic arrays appeared around Anna. Level 102 Great Lord-ranked rock guardians emerged from each array, stupefying Phoenix Rain and Blue Phoenix. They had prepared 16 Tier 3 summoning scrolls for this siege, and that was Phoenix Rain's limit. She wasn't the great pavilion master, so she only had access to a fraction of the guild's resources. Even so, this fraction was far more than what any ordinary first-rate guild possessed. And yet, not even the 16 Tier 3 summoning scrolls were a match for one of Anna's summoning spells. Anna began to chant another incantation before Phoenix Rain and Blue Phoenix had time to snap out of their daze. Golden runes began to appear on the rock guardians' bodies, increasing their basic attributes and defense significantly. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's members were utterly flabbergasted. Summoning 18 Great Lords was already ridiculous, yet Anna could strengthen every one of her Great Lords. Her very existence was beyond absurd. However, Anna hadn't finished her spell casting. She then began to cast her third spell. This time, her chant lasted for 5 seconds. When she completed her spell, a magic array with a 40-yard radius appeared above the 2 armies. After a short moment, a golden armored warrior with a shield and long sword fell from the array. Holy Knight, Elemental Creature, Grand Lord, Level 102. HP 320, 000, 000/320, 000. Crap. Is she really just a Tier 3 personal guard? Many players nearly cursed when they saw the Holy Knight. Anna was practically a one-man army. Only Xueqi maintained his composure. After all, he knew just how powerful Anna was. Anna was an epic guard with a 113 growth potential. He hadn't even heard of a personal guard with such high growth potential in his previous life. Moreover, magical classes were more suited to large-scale combat. Anna would perform even better than a Tier 4 melee class hero in a group battle. In truth, Anna's performance had exceeded Xueqi's expectations. Anna had only used her summoner class spells thus far. She hadn't even begun to use her Yin-Yang Saint class spells. With Anna at their side, the players regained their advantage on the battlefield. Of the 18 rock guardians Anna had summoned, 15 rushed forth to distract the undead warriors. The remaining rock guardians worked with the Holy Knight and Zero Wing's main force to target each undead warrior, one by one. Meanwhile, Kite worked with Arslet against the undead general. Although he wasn't as proficient in large-scale combat as Anna, his one-on-one combat power was superior to Anna's. With Arslet suppressing the mythic monster, Kite could attack, unobstructed. All 15 undead warriors were dead in less than half an hour, and facing both Kite and Arslet, the undead general had fallen too, leaving behind a pile of loot by its now still corpse. Chapter 2293. Capturing the Northern Fortress. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion members gaped in shock when they saw the undead general and 15 undead warriors die. We won just like that? Even Phoenix Rain felt as if she were dreaming. She had read the report on 13 Thrones' attempt to capture the small fortress. Both 13 Thrones and Starlink had suffered over 10,000 casualties just to get through the fortress's entrance. Moreover, they had only faced level 100+ Grand Lords, not a level 100+ mythic monster, during that battle. And yet, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had only lost a few hundred players, and Zero Wing's forces had already slain the undead warriors and undead general that served as the Northern Fortress's gatekeepers. All it had taken was one Tier 4 hero and 2 personal guards. Moreover, the hero wasn't as responsible for their success as the personal guard, Anna. No one would believe her if she told this tale. The undead general and undead warriors had also dropped better loot than any of them had expected. Not only had they dropped a lot of level 100 secret silver equipment, but several pieces of level 100 fine gold equipment had also dropped. The sight of their harvest even excited Phoenix Rain. The equipment's attributes were awe-inspiring. It was no exaggeration to say that a player in full level 100 secret silver equipment could easily defeat a player in level 90 dark gold set equipment. Furthermore, the loot included the Mountain Copper set, a level 100 secret silver set equipment. Everyone, get into the fortress. Ignore the mobs. Xueqi hurriedly commanded once the mini-bosses had died. We need to destroy the defensive magic towers before they repair the magic barrier. As long as the Northern Fortress's 4 defensive magic towers remained, they would automatically reconstruct the defensive magic barrier around the fortress. If they wanted this operation to succeed, they had to be extremely fast. Although destroying each defensive magic tower would significantly increase the time needed to reconstruct the array, the towers weren't easy to take down. As soon as players entered the fortress, they'd encounter an endless stream of monsters trying to stop them. And it wouldn't be long before the fortress's guardian boss joined the battle. With how large and spacious the Northern Fortress was, it was easy to imagine how difficult it would be to destroy the towers while keeping the guardian boss and mobs at bay. With Xueqi's command, the players swarmed toward the fortress's entrance, with everyone following the Tier 4 hero as Arslet opened a path. Beyond the walls, the Northern Fortress was organized like a town. As soon as they entered, the players were greeted by the sight of tattered houses. Undead filled the streets, and the defensive magic towers stood in the fortress's 4 corners, looking inconspicuous. Once the players crossed the entrance's threshold, they gasped. Numerous Grand Lord-ranked undead warriors roamed the streets, and when they saw the invaders, 2 mythic-ranked undead warlords emerged from the undead army's ranks. A 6-meter-tall undead followed behind the 2 undead warlords, wearing black armor and a crown on its head. When the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's experts sensed the crowned undead's horrific pressure and death energy, they couldn't help but shudder. Some of them even struggled to move. Undead Warlord, Undead, Mythic. Level 102. HP 630, 000, 000/630, 000, 000. Undead King, Undead Creature, Ancient Fiend, Mythic. Level 103. HP 1,420,000, 000/1420, 000, 000. Why does it have to be an ancient fiend? Even Xueqi was shocked when he saw the Undead King's statistics. He had known the Northern Fortress would be immensely difficult to capture, but he had never dreamed that the challenge would be this great. Based on what he remembered from his previous life, the Northern Fortress's guardian boss should only have been a mythic-ranked realm lord, yet the guardian boss before him was a mythic-ranked ancient fiend. Once it crossed the level 100 threshold, and its restrictions had been removed, a mythic-ranked ancient fiend could nearly rival a dragon. Before anyone could react, the undead king vanished. It reappeared above the player army, swinging down its skeletal greatsword. Overwhelming death energy poured down on the player army, so powerful that it cracked the space around it. Not good. Xueqi's expression turned grim at the sight. The undead king's intellect was far higher than the undead general they had faced moments ago. Once the guardian boss sensed the invaders, it launched an attack, targeting the most densely packed area. If they allowed the undead king to land its AoE attack, several thousand players would die instantly. However, just as the wave of dark energy was about to land on the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's members, a figure suddenly appeared in the air above them. This figure belonged to none other than Arslet. Arslet had activated a skill, sending a towering pillar of light crashing into the wave of dark energy. The light pillar neutralized the attack in the collision, and the resulting shockwave devoured a significant portion of the players' HPs. Some of them hadn't been able to cope at all and died. Although Arslet had the upper hand against the undead king, he couldn't suppress the ancient fiend completely. As a result, the undead king attacked the player army from time to time, each blow reaping several hundred lives and devastating the surrounding terrain. The pavilion's players began to despair. The difference between their strength and the undead king's was too massive. This was no longer a fight Tier 2 players had any hope of surviving. If the undead king was so terrifying, even while it was distracted, how were they supposed to deal with the 2 undead warlords and numerous undead warriors? Phoenix Pavilion Master. Leave the bosses to us. Your team should try to destroy the defensive magic towers as quickly as possible. Xueqi quickly reminded Phoenix Rain. Not only could the defensive magic towers regenerate the defensive magic array around the northern fortress, but they could also reinforce the guardian boss. Without those towers, the undead king, which was 17 levels lower than Arslet, wouldn't be able to attack the surrounding players while fighting the hero. The only hope they had of defeating the undead king relied on the defensive magic tower's destruction. If that failed, the fortress's undead would slay every player, regardless of whether or not Arslet could survive against the ancient fiend. But those 2 undead warlords, Phoenix Rain insisted, worried as she glanced at the mythic monsters that guarded the path to the defensive magic towers. The 2 undead warlords were no trivial opponents. They might not be as strong as the undead king, but if they ambushed her army's healers, the rest of her players would fall. Don't worry about them. We'll keep those 2 undead warlords busy. Xueqi shouted back. Xueqi then retrieved the Ring of Gospel, sacrificing 7,000 magic crystals to activate Miniature World and Ring of Brilliance. Within a 5,000-yard radius, space froze, and all enemies' physiques and basic attributes dropped. At the same time, all allies within 2,000 yards of Xueqi received a boost to their physiques and basic attributes. Everyone immediately sensed the gap between themselves and the undead army shortening significantly. Once that was done, Xueqi sent Anna and Kite after the 2 undead warlords. Although the undead warlords were powerful, the 2 mythic bosses would need quite some time to deal with the players when faced with a strengthened Holy Knight, Kite, and the suppressing barrier the 18 Rock Guardians had formed. When she saw this, Phoenix Rain stopped holding back, activating all of the Tier 3 summoning scrolls she had prepared to open a path to the defensive magic towers. She also used quite a few defensive magic arrays and Tier 4 large-scale destruction magic scrolls. Once the force had reached one of the towers, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's members bombarded it with their attacks. Time passed quickly. As each defensive magic tower fell, the undead king's attacks became more powerful. As a result, the player armor suffered more casualties. When only one defensive magic tower remained, the undead king began to attack the Rock Guardian's magic barrier to free the undead warriors. Hurry! That barrier won't last much longer. Xueqi urged Phoenix Rain and the others as he watched the barrier's mana reserves rapidly deplete. Just before the magic barrier shattered, the sound of a collapsing building echoed throughout the fortress. After fighting for more than an hour, suffering over 10,000 casualties, and expending all of their Tier 3 and Tier 4 magic scrolls, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's members had finally destroyed all 4 defensive magic towers. As the 4th and final defensive magic tower fell, the death energy and mana within the northern fortress substantially decreased. The undead king's basic attributes also fell by as much as 20%, instantly giving Arslet an overwhelming advantage. With Arslet suppressing the ancient fiend, The players were able to attack the undead warlords without interruption. Finally, after nearly 2 hours, the undead king and the 2 undead warlords died.
We did it! We won!
The surviving players cheered as the undead king collapsed to the ground. Even Phoenix Rain was immensely excited. She hadn't actually thought that they'd successfully capture the northern fortress. Xueqi stepped up to the undead king's corpse, quickly locating a dark gold token and picking it up. The moment Xueqi touched the token, the sound of a system notification reached every player's ears. Gravity Mountain Range Region System Announcement. Congratulations to Zero Wing for capturing the northern fortress and becoming its lord. Guild popularity in Dragonheart City increased by 10,000. Chapter 2294. Medium Fortress. The regional announcement repeated 3 times. Its contents stunning the players grinding in the Gravity Mountain range. The northern fortress has been captured? What's going on? Isn't the northern fortress the largest fortress in the northern region? Are you kidding me? Zero Wing actually took down the northern fortress? Is Zero Wing really so powerful? Practically every player in the Gravity Mountain range knew about the northern fortress. It was one of only 3 medium fortresses in the Gravity Mountain range and a hot topic among players. Thus far, the only power to secure a fortress the Gravity Mountain range was 13 thrones. But the guild had only claimed a small fortress. Taking into account the number of players on Dragonheart Island, a small fortress wasn't enough to satisfy demand. A medium fortress, on the other hand, was several times larger. Now that Zero Wing had captured the northern fortress, players grinding in the Gravity Mountain range wouldn't have to worry about a safe place to rest and recover. Everyone had assumed that the first power to capture a medium fortress would be one of Dragonheart Island's super guilds. Yet Zero Wing had accomplished the feat. No one had expected this outcome. However, the masses' shock was nothing compared to how stunned the island's various powers were over the news. How is this possible? That's the northern fortress we're talking about. How could a guild like Zero Wing possibly capture it? Start an investigation. I want to know every detail of the event. Not even 13 thrones dared to assault the northern fortress. Zero Wing must have used some special method to capture it. If we can learn this method, the rest of the Gravity Mountain Range's fortress will be ours. The various powers knew just how difficult these fortresses were to capture. Many of the island's superpowers had attempted such operations, only to fail. These powers also knew what kind of guild Zero Wing was. Even with the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's help, capturing the northern fortress should have been impossible for Zero Wing. If it were that easy, the various super guilds would have already occupied every fortress in the map. Zero Wing must have used some tool or special method to succeed. Meanwhile, a report regarding Zero Wing's success in capturing the northern fortress quickly made it to Melancholy's desk in the 13 Thrones Dragonheart City residence. Interesting. I hadn't really thought that they'd succeed, Melancholy commented, surprised as he read the initial report. As 13 Thrones Guild leader, Melancholy knew better than anyone on Dragonheart Island how challenging the Gravity Mountain Range's fortress were to capture. When he had first heard of the operation, he had assumed Zero Wing was going for broke, hoping it would work out somehow. The Warblood adventurer team was still going mad over trying to destroy the guild, after all. Guild leader, now that Zero Wing has captured the northern fortress, it will gain more influence on Dragonheart Island. Many powers will likely try to ally with the guild. Should we? Happy Art carefully asked Melancholy while eyeing Elder Wu. Elder Wu had been a strong advocate for their guild's relationship with Starlink since the superpower could be so helpful in capturing the Gravity Mountain Range's fortresses. And yet, Zero Wing had successfully claimed the northern fortress, a feat that not even 13 thrones had the strength to accomplish. Naturally, a medium fortress would offer far more and better benefits than a small fortress, and the various major powers already saw Zero Wing as a tempting ally. If 13 thrones waited until other powers had allied with Zero Wing first, it would lose a significant amount of potential profit. Happy Art, you reach conclusions too quickly, the masked woman behind Elder Wu spoke up. Although Zero Wing has the northern fortress, capturing it is a lot easier than defending it, especially now that the guild has angered both Starlink and Warblood. If we negotiate a partnership with Zero Wing, and it failed to defend the fortress, our guild will be in an awkward position? Happy Art fell silent for a moment. Other powers might not know much about the Gravity Mountain Range's fortresses, but 13 Thrones was very familiar with them. It was true that defending a fortress was far harder than capturing one. 13 Thrones had gone as far as stationing a large number of experts in the fortress long-term to protect it from periodic monster attacks, even utilizing a few of the guild's trump cards. Needless to say, even stronger monsters would assault a medium fortress. If Zero Wing couldn't protect the northern fortress during one of these monster attacks, the consequences would be dire. That kid has exceeded my expectations, but we should see if Zero Wing can defend the fortress before we make a decision, Elder Wu said. It won't be too late to negotiate a partnership once Zero Wing proves that it can hold the northern fortress. Elder Wu then stood and left the room. He didn't linger in the guild leader's office any longer. While Dragonheart Island's various superpowers discussed Zero Wing's success, Xueqi and his team were busy clearing the undead mobs out of the northern fortress. Capturing a monster-infested fortress wasn't the same as capturing a monster-infested town. Once a town's guardian boss was defeated, the remaining monsters would flee and disappear. However, in monster-infested fortresses, players had to kill the remaining monsters after defeating the guardian boss and claiming the fortress. Fortunately, once the monsters were dead, they wouldn't respawn. Guild leader Black Flame, we should have these undead mobs taken care of in a few more hours, Phoenix Rain reported. Chapter 2295. Peak construction. As he stepped into one of the dilapidated defensive magic towers, Xueqi used the fortress management token he had obtained to call up the 4 towers combined system interface. Sure enough, repairing the towers will cost a ton. Xueqi was astonished when he saw the repair cost for the 4 towers. If he wished to repair all 4 defensive magic towers, he would have to pay a total of 320,000 magic crystals and 120 units of 7 luminaries crystals. Zero Wing could afford the 320,000 magic crystals. After all, the guild had full control of a manatite vein and an attributed or vein. It earned more magic crystals than an ordinary superpower. Unfortunately, the 7 luminaries crystals weren't as common. Although 7 luminaries crystals dropped in certain team dungeons and maps, the drop rate was painfully low. Even now, Zero Wing had barely saved up 200 units. He would have to part with more than half of Zero Wing's stock if he wanted to repair all 4 defensive magic towers. In the end, however, Xueqi gritted his teeth and accepted the cost. Only medium fortresses and larger had the privilege of using defensive magic towers, and these towers were not limited to creating a defensive magic array to protect the fortress from invaders. They could also gather and concentrate the fortress's mana, as well as act as a teleportation point. Players couldn't rely on return scrolls or guild transfer scrolls to return to a rest area while in the World Tower. They'd have to rely on their own feet to travel back and forth. Of course, players could rely on land or flying mounts, but this was a lot more difficult than using a return scroll. Players would have to conserve some of their stamina for the return trip, which limited how long they could grind. Meanwhile, the defensive magic towers could nullify some of the World Tower suppression, and players could connect return scrolls to the tower's teleportation point. This way, players could teleport to the defensive magic towers freely. Although the defensive magic towers were only effective on their own floor, meaning that players couldn't teleport to the fortress after descending to the next underground floor, these towers had been immensely popular during Xueqi's previous life. Every floor in the World Tower was massive, and traveling across them was inconvenient. Because of the defensive magic towers, the World Tower's medium fortresses could make more profit than their smaller counterparts. Aside from profiting from visiting players, medium towers could also earn money from NPCs through the defensive magic towers. These towers significantly increased a fortress's defensive value, and NPC merchants, who disliked risk, would only visit fortresses with a high enough defensive value. Naturally, there was a massive difference between player-generated profit and profit earned from NPC merchants. Although ancient coins were Dragonheart City's only currency, players generally spent ancient copper and ancient silver. They rarely spent ancient gold. This was why 13 Thrones had earned much ancient gold since capturing a small fortress. However, NPC merchants were a different story. If an NPC merchant rented one of a fortress's shops, they'd pay with ancient gold. The more NPCs that visited a fortress, the more ancient gold a fortress's ruling power would earn. Xueqi desperately needed ancient gold. His desire for it had become even greater after defeating the ancient fiend-ranked undead king. Normally, a fortress's bosses only dropped average loot. That was clear based on the loot the mythic-ranked undead general had dropped. Compared to the boss's loot, the fortress itself was the true prize. Aside from the fortress management toke, the undead king had dropped an extremely rare item. The Freedom Hotel design. Xueqi had thought he was hallucinated when he had seen the design. The Freedom Hotel was a peak construction in God's domain. Meanwhile, and it was even more valuable than a fragmented legendary item. For a guild city to become a main city, it needed a peak construction. Thus, owning the design for one was akin to obtaining a main city. Furthermore, a peak construction's abilities were out of this world. If he could construct a Freedom Hotel, he could elevate Stone Forest City into an intermediate city. The difference between an intermediate city and a basic city in a level 100+ map was like the difference between heaven and earth when it came to helping players complete their Tier 3 promotion quests. Of course, building a peak construction was extremely difficult. Every required material was exceedingly rare in God's domain, and many of them couldn't be stored in a player's bag space. The precious boundary stone was one such example. One could only find a boundary stone by luck. The only place that sold them was the black market, and each stone cost 8,000 ancient gold. Meanwhile, constructing the Freedom Hotel required 3 boundary stones, and including the cost of the other materials, the Freedom Hotel's construction would cost at least 40,000 ancient gold. Moreover, organizing a large-scale mining operation for the Gravity Mountain Range's rare ore veins would be a massive ancient gold expense. The ore veins in the World Tower were crawling with monsters, especially at night. Every ore vein in the World Tower was practically a monster nest. Even expert teams would be annihilated if they weren't careful. A small-scale operation wouldn't be a problem, but to set up a large-scale operation, one would need to construct a mine and defensive structures, both of which cost ancient gold. If Xueqi wanted to develop Zero Wing in the World Tower quickly, he needed ancient gold. Time passed quickly. While Xueqi and the others slew the remaining monsters and repaired the fortress's various buildings, a system announcement reached every player in the map. Gravity Mountain Range Region System Announcement. Congratulations to the War-Blood Adventurer team for capturing the Rock Nest Fortress and becoming its lord. Guild popularity in Dragonheart City increased by 5,000. The system announcement caused another uproar throughout the Gravity Mountain Range. What? Zero Wing has just captured the Northern Fortress, yet Warblood has already captured the Rock Nest Fortress? Warblood really is vicious. With 2 fortresses in a single region, Zero Wing won't be able to generate as much income from the Northern Fortress. To make matters worse, the Rock Nest Fortress occupied the path to the Northern region. That's nothing. Warblood has also allied itself with quite a few of Dragonheart Island's top 10 adventurer teams. They're going to work together to seal off the Northern region. They've declared that anybody who visits the Northern Fortress will be considered one of the adventurer team's enemies. How vicious! Even with a fortress, Zero Wing has no hope of surviving in Dragonheart City. Zero Wing can only blame itself for provoking so many of the island's powers. The players grinding in the Gravity Mountain Range were astonished by how fast and decisively Warblood had captured the Rock Nest Fortress. They hadn't expected the adventurer team to strike down Zero Wing as soon as it had some success on Dragonheart Island. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ew, what should we do, Big Sis Rain? Blue Phoenix paled when she read the latest report. Because of Warblood's declaration, players that had been preparing to visit our fortress are backing out due to fear. Maintaining a fortress wasn't easy. They'd have to station players here long-term to deal with the occasional monster raids. Meanwhile, players were a fortress's main source of income. If players weren't willing to visit the Northern Fortress, they'd be lucky not to hemorrhage money on the fortress's upkeep. How did they secure the Rock Nest Fortress so quickly? Phoenix Rain's expression darkened when she heard the news. Although she had known that Warblood planned to capture the fortress, she hadn't thought that it would succeed so soon. Why don't we go teach them a lesson? Guild leader Aqua Rose suggested in a chilly tone after reading about Warblood's threat. Forget it. Their fortress is under a 3-day protection period. Attacking them would be meaningless right now, Xueqi said, shaking his head. Chuckling, he continued, however, since they want to play, we'll play. Spread the word that whoever visits the Rock Nest Fortress will be declaring Zero Wing an enemy. None of them will be allowed through the Northern Fortress's gates. Chapter 2296. Fortress opens Gravity Mountain Range, Rock Nest Fortress. The Rock Nest Fortress stood atop the northern canyon. From afar, it looked like a nest, which was how it had earned its name. The fortress was easy to defend and difficult to attack. However, the fortress was filled with tens of thousands of level 85+ players that were busy slaying the fortress's prior residents, the Blackstone Ores. Several tens of thousands of Blackstone Ores had garrisoned the fortress, but less than 10,000 remained. Lying quietly in the fortress's heart was the 4-meter-tall Ore King, and all sorts of weapons, equipment, and materials were scattered around its corpse. I hadn't thought that capturing a fortress would be this profitable. It's no wonder why 13 Thrones is so eager to capture a second one, Nine Dragons Emperor said, sighing ruefully as he gazed at the items on the ground. Even in the Gravity Mountain range, Great Lord rank and higher monsters were relatively rare, yet the Rock Nest Fortress had been home to tons of them. Since this was the first time these monsters had been slain, their drop rate was much higher than the monsters that wandered the map. Clearing out the Blackstone Ores had yielded over 10,000 weapons and equipment pieces. Moreover, every item is level 90 or above. There were even some level 100 weapons and equipment among the loot. Although most of the weapons and equipment were only secret silver rank, with a few fine gold rank items, it was more than enough to serve as interim equipment. At the very least, his subordinates could use these items to start raiding level 90 super large-scale team dungeons as soon as they were the appropriate level. It's only natural. Every fortress in the Gravity Mountain range is a treasure trove. We had planned to work with Starlink to capture a medium fortress, but I hadn't expected Zero Wing to claim the northern fortress successfully. We had no choice but to move forward with our plans, Bloodoath said. His voice cold, he continued, even with the northern fortress, I'll ensure that Zero Wing has no place on Dragonheart Island. That's right. That Zero Wing is too arrogant. They look down on you, Commander Blood, Nine Dragons Emperor said, nodding. I suspect the guild's members have already begun to panic. Without any visiting players, even the best fortress in the world is useless. Warblood, Crimson Shadow, and Night Sword, 3 of Dragonheart Island's top 10 adventurer teams, had agreed to work together against Zero Wing. Not a single adventurer team on the island would dare cross these 3. Furthermore, Warblood and Starlink were collaborating to seal off the northern region. Anyone that dared to explore the area would be making a one-way trip. Aside from Zero Wing's members and Phoenix Rain's subordinates, no one would visit the northern fortress. They had ensured that the northern fortress would be nothing more than a bottomless pit, steadily devouring Zero Wing's funds. The Gravity Mountain Range's fortresses weren't like the fortresses in the outside world. Monster attacks were more frequent here. Maintaining a small fortress cost enough of a fortune to give superpowers a headache, not to mention a medium fortress's maintenance, and that was excluding the subsidies a power would need to pay the players that guarded the fortresses. While Nine Dragons Emperor and Bloodoath conversed, a woman with an ancient bow approached. Commander, Zero Wing has made a move. They've mimicked out declaration, announcing that any player that entered the Rock Nest Forest will have no place in the northern fortress, Inkfeather announced, smiling as she read the report she had just received. They're trying to compete with our influence on Dragonheart Island? Black Flame is a fool. Does he really think Dragonheart Island is the same as Starmoon Kingdom? Bloodoath laughed. Commander Blood, I doubt that Black Flame knows that we found a mana well in the Rock Nest Fortress. Otherwise, he'd have never made this decision, Nine Dragons Emperor said, smirking. The mana well was the Rock Nest Fortress's exclusive construction. Although repairing it would deplete their liquid funds, the mana well's effects were well worth the cost. With this mana well, players could fully recover their stamina and concentration within half an hour. The mana well's effects would tempt every player grinding in the Gravity Mountain range. The main reason that players visited fortresses was to rest and recover their stamina and concentration, and for the cost of 1 ancient gold coin, players could make a full recovery within 30 minutes. Countless players on Dragonheart Island would seek this benefit. As news of the mana well spread, even the players that visited the 13 Thrones small fortress would likely shift their attention to the Rock Nest Fortress, not to mention the powers that were considering setting up a base in the northern fortress. Since Black Flame is so eager to die, I don't mind sending him to his grave. Turning to Inkfeather, Bloodoath commanded, Ink, quietly inform the various major powers on Dragonheart Island of the mana well. I'm sure they'll know what to do once they receive the news. Understood. Inkfeather grew even more eager to see Xueqi despair. Unless they were stupid, the various powers would recognize the most beneficial fortress once word of the mana well spread. Meanwhile, in 13 Thrones residence in Dragonheart City, Zero Wing thinks that it can suppress Warblood just because it has captured a medium fortress? The guild still isn't aware of how foolish it's being, Elder Wu, who rested in his office, said as he read the report his subordinate had sent. 1,000. Have Lu Xinglua pay me a visit. Tell him that it's about capturing a medium fortress. Understood. The masked woman named 1,000 Lives smiled and nodded. In her opinion, Zero Wing was extremely foolish. The guild simply didn't realize how powerful superpowers foundations were. Elsewhere, in the Gravity Mountain Range's northern fortress. While Phoenix Rain organized the fortress's repairs, Xueqi concentrated on restoring the defensive magic tower's magic arrays. The magic crystals and 7 luminaries crystals he had spent to repair the towers only repaired the core crystals. It was barely enough to activate the towers. To restore the defensive magic towers to full power, players needed to repair the magic arrays and magic circuits within the towers. However, this wasn't an easy task. It required an advanced magician at the very least, and the work was intensively time-consuming. Fortunately, Xueqi was almost a master magician, so he could repair the arrays and circuits smoothly and swiftly. Once the 4 defensive magic towers' final magic circuit had been repaired, the tower system interface reported that the towers were complete. System: the northern fortress's defensive magic towers have been fully repaired. It will cost 8,000 magic crystals to activate them and 6,000 magic crystals per day to maintain them. Do you wish to activate the defensive magic towers? Running at 100% efficiency is certainly expensive. Xueqi was a little astonished when he read the system notification. The tower's operation cost was much higher than an ordinary magic tower. Not even ordinary first-rate guilds could afford to keep the northern fortress's defensive magic towers running constantly. However, Xueqi did not hesitate, activating the towers immediately. After Xueqi had sacrificed the required magic crystals, a twofold magic array appeared above the northern fortress, enveloping it. The twofold magic array then created a double-layered magic barrier around the fortress, which was much stronger than the barrier Xueqi and Phoenix Rain's army had broken through. At the same time, all of the mana within a 10,000-yard radius of the northern fortress began to gather within the fortress's walls. The fortress's mana density skyrocketed, especially in the fortress's core. The mana there was so dense that it transformed into a white mist. The players within the mist felt an indescribably pleasant sensation course through them, and a second experience bar appeared below their main bar, show that they had accumulated the double EXP buff. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion members were dumbfounded. Aqua, how are the fortress's repairs coming along? Xueqi asked after contacting Aqua Rose. We're 60% done. According to your instructions, we've prioritized hotels and accommodations, so they're ready now, Aqua Rose reported. Good. In that case, we can open the fortress to the public, Xueqi said, smiling. He then called up the northern fortress's system interface and did just that. Chapter 2297. Heading to the northern fortress. After Xueqi opened the northern fortress to the public, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilions and Zero Wings members quickly disseminated news of this throughout the Gravity Mountain Range and Dragonheart City. Zero Wing opened the northern fortress so quickly. Zero Wing is probably trying to snag some advantages. However, now that Warblood has made that kind of threat, who would dare visit the northern fortress? The various adventurer teams in the Gravity Mountain Range shook their heads and sighed at this piece of news. The small fortress 13 thrones captured was hardly enough to accommodate the players operating in the Gravity Mountain Range. Hence, the capture of the northern fortress was naturally good news. However, Warblood had already stated that whoever dared visit the northern fortress would become its enemy. The various adventurer teams with weak foundations did not dare provoke the Warblood adventurer team at all. Meanwhile, over at the Rock Nest Fortress, Warblood and 9 Dragons Emperor had also received news of the northern fortress's opening. Commander Blood, it seems Zero Wing is really anxious. Instead of properly making use of the fortress's 3-day protection period, it actually opened the fortress so quickly. With this, before we can even take action, the northern fortress will most likely fall to the monster tides first. This situation elated 9 Dragons Emperor. The various superpowers operating on Dragonheart Island all knew that defending a fortress in the Gravity Mountain Range, especially against the first monster tide a fortress would face, was much more difficult than capturing one. Hence, the wisest decision was to utilize every second of the 3-day protection period after a fortress's conquest to enhance the fortress's defenses as much as possible. Now, however, Just one day after seizing the northern fortress, Zero Wing had taken the initiative to lift the protection mechanism and open the northern fortress to the public. Since the Rock Nest fortress had yet to open, such an action would indeed attract some players to the northern fortress. However, the monster tide at the northern fortress would not weaken just because the guild didn't take full advantage of the protection mechanism. Zero Wing is indeed quick. Unfortunately for it, I won't leave it with even the slightest shred of hope, Blood Oath said coldly. Inc. Spread the news that we'll be opening Rock Nest Fortress tomorrow. We'll thoroughly eliminate the various adventurer teams and guild's thoughts of moving to Lee Northern Fortress. Upon hearing Blood Oath's words, Nine Dragons' Emperor was surprised. He never thought that Blood Oath would be so vicious as to give Zero Wing no opportunities whatsoever. In reality, although opening the Northern Fortress so soon was very risky, Zero Wing's decision was still a considerably effective move. After all, the number of players grinding in the Gravity Mountain range increased with each passing day. 13 Thrones' small fortress couldn't satisfy the needs of all of these players by itself. Hence, despite Warblood's influence and deterrence, some adventurer teams and guilds would still rest in the Northern Fortress. After all, traveling between the Gravity Mountain range and Dragonheart City required a lot of time which they could spend earning more income. However, if the various adventurer teams and guilds only had to wait one more day for Rocknest Fortress's opening, then they would generally show Warblood some respect and avoid visiting the Northern Fortress, thereby rendering Zero Wing's actions meaningless. Meanwhile, shortly after Warblood issued its new announcement, Ku Rong, who was in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's residence in Dragonheart City, received news about it. Moon, what do you think of this situation? Ku Rong asked as he looked at the majestic woman seated at a corner of his office. Originally, I had a considerably high opinion of Zero Wing, Cloudy Moon said unhurriedly. Unfortunately, Warblood and Starlink's influence is far too great. Their foundations are also extraordinary. Even if Black Flame possesses frightening combat power, he alone can't change the overall situation. Moreover, I heard that 13 Thrones is already planning on working with Starlink again to capture a medium fortress. Once that happens, Zero Wing would lose all its advantages. In Cloudy Moon's opinion, Phoenix Rain's decision was simply too immature. Had Phoenix Rain accepted Starlink's offer for partnership before, then her promotion to Great Pavilion Master would have been practically guaranteed. Unfortunately, Phoenix Rain ended up giving away that opportunity to Nine Dragons' Emperor. Alright, I understand. Go make the necessary preparations, Ku Rong sighed. Now that the situation was clear for all to see, if the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion wished to form a good relationship with Starlink, then Phoenix Rain, who was now considered Starlink's enemy, was unsuitable for the position of Great Pavilion Master. While the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was secretly making its preparations, the various powers of Dragonheart City were in an uproar over Warblood's decisiveness. This situation allowed the general population in Dragonheart City to realize once more how frightening superpowers were. Even though Zero Wing was a large guild that successfully captured the Northern Fortress, it was still no more than an ant before a superpower. Meanwhile, on a gravel hill in the Gravity Mountain range, 100 level 85 plus experts geared in level 85 secret silver equipment were frantically besieging a level 89 Grand Lord. After his challenge ended, he even received an epic ranked replica of the legendary weapon Hurricane's injury. This replica was top tier even among epic weapons. Moreover, the Great Sword also had high compatibility with him. As a result, his combat power underwent a qualitative improvement after he equipped the weapon. Now that Zero Wing was in trouble, how could he just stand by and do nothing? Since Warblood wished to seal the pathway leading toward the northern region and prevent players from entering or exiting the area, then Swimming Dragon could just stick to grinding in the northern region. In any case, with the northern fortress around, he would not have to worry about having nowhere to rest. Warblood wouldn't be able to do anything against him. The other members of Dragon Riders had no choice but to listen to their commander's words and head off toward the northern fortress. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. After traveling by mount for several hours and carefully avoiding Warblood's members, Swimming Dragon and the others finally arrived at the northern fortress. However, the moment everyone walked through the fortress's gates, they were stunned. What's going on? Why is the mana density here so high? No, it's not just the mana here. I can feel my body becoming significantly lighter as well. It's as if the suppression outside is gone. Chapter 2298. Heavenly Fortress. After momentarily falling into a daze, Dragon Riders members promptly revealed ecstatic expressions on their faces.
It's true. That pressure really has disappeared.
Boss, if we can rest here long term, we can keep grinding in the Gravity Mountain range without returning to Dragonheart City. If that's the case, we won't need more than half a month to surpass those top 8 adventurer teams subordinate to Heaven's Blade.
Previously, they had not expected much of the Northern Fortress.
After all, they had visited 13 Thrones Fortress before, so they knew what purpose the Gravity Mountain range's fortresses served. These fortresses were merely temporary rest areas. Aside from allowing players to recover stamina and concentration, they only provided materials replenishment and weapons and equipment repair. However, the Northern Fortress completely overthrew their understanding of the Gravity Mountain range's fortresses. Setting aside accumulating the double EXP buff inside the Northern Fortress, just the fact that the fortress could remove the ever-present pressure they felt while grinding in the Gravity Mountain range was already plenty amazing. Since the Northern Fortress had this kind of ability, they would not need to head back to Dragonheart City to relieve themselves of this pressure. Although the pressure the Gravity Mountain range exerted on them had only a minuscule effect, long-term exposure would still build up mental fatigue, which would rise especially quickly when they were fighting against powerful monsters. Hence, even with the opportunity to rest in 13 Thrones Fortress, they would still return to Dragonheart City once every 4 or 5 days to relax and refresh their minds. At this point, it was already their 3rd day in the Gravity Mountain range, so the mental fatigue they had accumulated was quite significant. However, the moment they entered the Northern Fortress, said mental fatigue had disappeared completely. Normally, this pleasant sensation was something they would feel only after returning to Dragonheart City. If they could rid themselves of the Gravity Mountain range's pressure just by entering the Northern Fortress, then they could forego returning to Dragonheart City and remain in the Gravity Mountain range. With this, they could save plenty on the travel time between the World Tower and Dragonheart City, thereby increasing their leveling speed and resource acquisition rate. In this situation, Swimming Dragon could not help being overjoyed. The Northern Fortress's benefits might not seem like much, but with persistence, a drop of water could wear out even a stone. With the help of the Northern Fortress's ability, the Dragon Riders adventurer team could slowly pull ahead of Dragonheart City's adventurer teams. Surpassing the top 8 adventurer teams subordinate to Heaven's Blade would also be a piece of cake. During the time Dragon Riders members were strolling about, enjoying the Northern Fortress's pressure-free environment, a gasp suddenly appeared in the team chat.
Boss, come over here, quickly. I discovered something good.
A level 87 Tigerkin shield warrior yelled excitedly.
What is it? What's so important that you need to make such a huge fuss?
Swimming Dragon asked, exasperated. Dragon Riders was a well-known adventurer team on Dragonheart Island. Having one of its members act like a country bumpkin in front of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilions and Zero Wings members after entering the Northern Fortress was a huge embarrassment to the adventurer team.
Boss, it's the teleportation scroll for this fortress.
Return scrolls for the Northern Fortress are available at the defensive magic towers.
The Tigerkin shield warrior replied. What? Return scrolls?
Swimming Dragon's breathing momentarily grew heavier. Return scrolls for locations in the outside world were unusable inside the World Tower. Meanwhile, the Gravity Mountain range was an extremely dangerous place, and players could enter a death zone unawares at any time. Players might be able to escape momentarily using instantaneous transfer scrolls, but without the help of a return scroll, they would still encounter countless perils on their way back to safety. If players could utilize return scrolls inside the Gravity Mountain range, they would no longer have to be afraid of exploring unknown and dangerous regions. Moreover, with return scrolls, players would no longer have to conserve their stamina and concentration to walk back to the nearest rest area, increasing their range of operations drastically.
Buy them. Buy them all quickly.
It doesn't matter even if they cost 1 ancient gold each. Swimming Dragon ordered, his eyes glowing with excitement. Ancient gold might be difficult to earn, but compared to their lives, let alone 1 ancient gold, even 10 ancient gold would not be comparable. After all, even a single death at their levels would deprive them of plenty of opportunities.
Boss, relax. These return scrolls are sold by NPCs.
You can have as many as you want. Moreover, each return scroll costs only 10 ancient silver. However, these return scrolls are bound to the buyer and cannot be transferred to other players, the Tigerkin shield warrior said, grinning.
What? Only 10 ancient silver?
For a moment, Swimming Dragon thought he had misheard. Ordinary players might not be able to bear the price of 10 ancient silver, but this was easily affordable for experts like themselves. After all, just entering the Gravity Mountain range cost 5 ancient silver, while entering a fortress was 1 ancient silver, and staying in a hotel, 2 to 3 ancient silver. Following which, Swimming Dragon had everyone in his team immediately go and purchase some return scrolls at the defensive magic towers. In fact, aside from some money for accommodation and repair fees, he told his teammates to spend all their ancient silver to purchase the Northern Fortress's return scrolls, afraid that the return scrolls would become unavailable or increase in price in the future. However, what Swimming Dragon did not know was that the system handled the price for the Northern Fortress's return scrolls, which could be considered one of the special abilities of the defensive magic towers. This ability was something similar to the additional skills found on weapons and equipment. Xueqi had no say in the settings and could only collect a portion of the profits. Meanwhile, even after having his teammates spend all their spare ancient silver on return scrolls, Swimming Dragon was still not satisfied. After all, he knew that so long as they exploited this opportunity to the fullest, the Dragon Riders Adventurer team could see a qualitative leap in development. Notify everyone in the Adventurer team and have them come to the Northern Fortress. From now onwards, the Northern Fortress will be Dragon Riders' main headquarters. Swimming Dragon said. After saying so, he immediately visited 4 of the Northern Fortress's basic hotels and rented all 4 long-term for 60 ancient gold per day. He intended to have these 4 hotels serve as Dragon Riders' temporary headquarters and lodging for the Adventurer team's members. That way, members would not have to worry about accommodations and end up sleeping on the streets. Shortly after Swimming Dragon gave his command, Dragon Riders members promptly sprang into action. All 2,000 plus members of the Adventurer team suddenly headed to the World Tower. The large-scale movement piqued the curiosity of many of the Adventurer teams that had close relations with Dragon Riders. Some players that were friends with Dragon Riders members also asked their friends about this situation. What are you guys trying to do? Is Dragon Riders conducting some kind of large-scale operation? It's not a large-scale operation. Our Adventurer team is just moving our main headquarters to the Northern Fortress. Are you guys insane? Didn't you hear the threat Warblood made? Warblood might be powerful, but we can simply stick to the northern region. At worst, we'll just avoid grinding in the Gravity Mountain Range's other areas. Here, let me tell you a secret. Zero Wing's Northern Fortress is freaking amazing. Not only can you accumulate the double EXP buff there, but my team leader says that you can even rid yourself of the Gravity Mountain Range's ever-present pressure by entering the Northern Fortress. What's even more amazing is that there are return scrolls on sale at the Northern Fortress. With those, even ordinary experts like us can grind freely and efficiently in the Gravity Mountain Range. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You're kidding me, right? I've been to 13 Thrones Fortress before. It's fine if you don't believe me, but once my level surpasses yours, don't say that I never told you about this. After saying so, the members of Dragon Riders hurried toward the Northern Fortress. They all wished to start competing for the Gravity Mountain Range's leveling resources as soon as possible. While the Dragon Riders Adventurer team was rushing to the Northern Fortress, information about the Northern Fortress started spreading among some of Dragonheart City's adventurer teams. Shortly after, news of it also reached Dragonheart City's major powers. Chapter 2299. Popular fortress Dragonheart City was originally already bubbling over the conflict between Zero Wing and Warblood. Hence, the city's various powers were keeping an eye out for news about the Northern Fortress. The World Tower could be said to be Dragonheart City's greatest resource. The various powers had all obtained a large number of leveling and material resources from it. Meanwhile, the Gravity Mountain Range's fortresses played a crucial role in further enhancing their resource acquisition rate. With rumors regarding the Northern Fortress's devastating abilities proliferating, Dragonheart City's various powers immediately launched an investigation to ascertain the truth. Return scrolls. Investigate. I want this information verified as soon as possible. Previously, the various powers had nothing much to say much about Warblood's threat, as Warblood had also captured a fortress in the northern region and was going to open it just one day after the Northern Fortress opened. A one-day difference wouldn't affect their development by much. Moreover, the Northern Fortress's location was remote, so it wasn't particularly attractive to the various powers. At best, it could only serve as a rest area. However, things were different now. The Northern Fortress's return scroll would be a game-changer in the Gravity Mountain range. The difference between having a return scroll and not having one while grinding in the Gravity Mountain range was massive. Moreover, the effects would snowball as time passed. The reason the various powers had set up a base of operations in Dragonheart City was to gain better development resources. If their own profits were not affected, the various powers would show Warblood some respect and avoid provoking it as much as possible. However, it was a whole other story if conceding to Warblood's demands affected their development by a significant margin. Dragonheart City's various powers sent scouts to check out the Northern Fortress, which crowded the hall of the World Tower's first underground floor. The moment the various power scouts entered the Northern Fortress, they were shocked by the fortress's environment. The high mana density and lack of mental pressure here made the Northern Fortress no different from Dragonheart City. It was entirely possible for players to use the Northern Fortress as a temporary base. With the Northern Fortress, they would no longer have to shuttle between the World Tower and Dragonheart City. Most importantly, the Northern Fortress possessed return scrolls. The price of 10 ancient silver nearly had the visiting players wondering whether they were hallucinating. After the various power scouts reported back about the situation inside the Northern Fortress, a huge commotion erupted in Dragonheart City. The Gravity Mountain Range's resources were incomparably abundant. Until now, the various powers had yet to explore even 2/3 of the entire map. This was especially true for the ruins of the ancient civilization. These ruins contained a plethora of precious treasures. Only, due to the Gravity Mountain Range's environment, exploring these ruins was still incredibly difficult, even with the help of a small fortress. Meanwhile, although the Northern Fortress was in a remote area, it perfectly solved the hindrance to staying in the Gravity Mountain Range long-term. This meant that guild members could start exploring the various ancient ruins with much greater efficiency than before and secure even more resources for themselves. Their exploration progress might even surpass that of 13 Thrones, which possessed a small fortress. Notify everyone immediately. We're shifting our guild's base of operations on Dragonheart Island to the Northern Fortress. But what about Warblood? Screw them. This is an opportunity for our guild. We'll kill anybody that stands in our way. Less than an hour after the various powers based in Dragonheart City verified the rumors regarding the Northern Fortress, many started sending a large number of experts there lest other powers get ahead of them. After all, the Northern Fortress was only a medium fortress. Unlike a city, a medium fortress could accommodate only a very limited number of players. The number of hotels in a fortress was especially limited. Not resting in a hotel would severely impact players' recovery speed. Moreover, according to the Power's investigations, the Northern Fortress's hotels could even hasten the double EXP buff's accumulation rate. The difference between having a hotel to rest in and not having one would drastically affect their leveling speed. Meanwhile, over at the Gravity Mountain Range's Northern Fortress, the sudden influx of players made the fortress bustle. Big Sis Rain, according to our latest statistics, over 150,000 players have visited the Northern Fortress thus far, and estimates state that we should hit the 400,000 mark by the end of today. Blue Phoenix reported excitedly as she approached Phoenix Rain. Back when 13 Thrones had successfully captured a fortress, despite the huge commotion in Dragonheart City, the fortress had managed to attract only around 200,000 visitors on its first day. Meanwhile, the fortress had a player population of only 700,000, which was also the maximum capacity of a small fortress. In comparison, the Northern Fortress was expected to attract over 400,000 visitors on the opening day alone. It would most likely take only 2 or 3 days to exceed the 700,000 threshold. Reaching the maximum capacity of 1,500,000 players was only a matter of time. It should be known that even with just a 700,000 player population, 13 Thrones small fortress generated tons of wealth and resources every day. Although Blue Phoenix did not know how much the small fortress was earning exactly, according to the investigations of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion spies, the fortress's daily income was at least 5,000 ancient gold and 600,000 ancient silver. Once the Northern Fortress's player population reached maximum capacity, one could easily imagine how much income it would generate. Moreover, the Northern Fortress had many more sources of revenue than 13 Thrones small fortress. Even though Phoenix Rain held only 20% of the Northern Fortress's shares, the income she would receive could rival half of a small fortress's total income, at the very least. Half. Even Starlink did not receive half of the income from 13 Thrones small fortress. At that time, who would dare question Phoenix Rain's position in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion? I'm afraid that even Warblood and Starlink did not expect such an outcome. When Phoenix Rain looked at the statistics report in her hand, she could not help but sigh ruefully. Previously, even after successfully capturing the Northern Fortress, she had still felt that Xueqi had gone overboard with his actions in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's residence. Now, however, it would seem that the one to regret their actions would not be Zero Wing, but Warblood instead. The Northern Fortress's future was already clear for all to see. Once a sufficient number of players gathered and the Northern Fortress was in full operation, it would be impossible for Warblood to exhaust and destroy Zero Wing in the Sea of Death. After all, the disparity in the incomes of the two sides would be simply too massive. Aside from Phoenix Rain, Dragonheart City's various superpowers were entertaining such thoughts as well. Although Warblood had captured the Rocknest Fortress, the difference between that and the Northern Fortress was far too massive. With this, Warblood had backed itself into a corner. After all, Warblood had previously declared that it would ban all those who entered the Northern Fortress from the Rocknest Fortress. Now, the players that were originally planning on resting at the Rocknest Fortress would not dare approach the fortress at all. A situation that would definitely reduce the Rocknest Fortress's income. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. While the various powers were paying attention to the Northern Fortress, Xueqi was hustling in the Northern Fortress. Not only did he have to reorganize the Northern Fortress's construction plans, due to the explosive increase in player population, but he also had to deal with the partnership offers and shop purchase requests from the various powers. Guild leader, the Fong family's people have visited our main headquarters and stated that they wish to meet you, Gentle Snow, who is currently organizing the information on the Northern Fortress's shops, said, a grim expression on her face. Previously, due to her personal matters, Xueqi had stepped forward to provoke the Fong family, the #1 family in Fonglin City, which possessed extraordinary influence in the city. The fact that the Fong family was paying Zero Wing a visit now definitely wasn't good news for the guild. The Fong family? Xueqi nodded. Let's go meet them then. Chapter 2300. Clash with the Fong family. Zero Wing's main headquarters, top floor reception room. 4 people waited in the reception room, and the atmosphere was unusually depressing. Xiao Yu, who acted as the receptionist, wore a particularly ugly expression. Xiao Yu's reaction to the middle-aged man was the cause of the atmosphere in the room. The older gentleman wore gray, martial artist robes and loomed like a mountain. His aura was also quite oppressive. However, his physical presence wasn't the only reason for Xiao Yu's reaction. His identity was the true reason. The middle-aged man was the current head of the Fong family and the chairman of the Qilin Corporation, Fong Zhenyuan. The Qilin Corporation might not be on the same level as the Five States Corporation, but it was one of the first-rate corporations in the country. It was also why the Fong family stood at the top among Fonglin City's powerful families. If Fong Zhenyuan wished it, he could destroy the Big Dipper Group with a word. Why wouldn't Xiao Yu be afraid with such an important individual before him? Fong Zhenyuan was a true mogul in the business world. Nothing like the youngsters that had inherited their family's businesses. A young man and woman accompanied Fong Zhenyuan in the room. The young man was none other than Fong Mingyu, the Fong family's strongest expert of the younger generation. On the other hand, Xiao Yu didn't recognize the young woman with long wavy hair and wearing a bright red dress. However, he knew she must be of high status, considering that she visited Zero Wing's headquarters alongside Fong Zhenyuan. As Xiao Yu wondered why a VIP like Fong Zhenyuan would visit Zero Wing's headquarters, the reception room's doors opened, and Xueqi, by Qing Xue, and Lei Bao entered. Fong Mingyu's indifferent expression vanished the moment he saw Xueqi. Even Xiao Yu could see the fear in the large man's eyes. However, Fong Mingyu's gaze also contained a trace of killing intent. Xiao Yu found the man's reaction reasonable after giving the matter some thought. Fong Mingyu was the Fong family's prided genius. Yet Xueqi had subdued him with a single move in the Redstone restaurant. To make matters worse, Fonglin City's upper society frequently visited the Redstone restaurant, and they wouldn't miss the news of Fong Mingyu's miserable defeat. I had my doubts about Mingyu's claim, but looking at you now, it seems he had been correct. You are both courageous and strong. I'm afraid none among the younger generation is a match for you, Fong Zhenyuan said, a trace of shock flashing in his eyes as he examined Xueqi. Gentle Snow, who had already been worried about this visit, began to panic when she saw Fong Zhenyuan. She had never expected him to visit Zero Wing personally.
Mr. Feng's praise is too generous. May I know what business the Feng family has with me today? Xuefeng asked, getting straight to the point. The Feng family's visit didn't particularly surprise Xuefeng. Since they had made a personal appearance, they must have important business to discuss, but Xuefeng had no desire to play their word games. He still had a lot he needed to do. Since you've asked, I'll just put it bluntly. You'd caused quite a commotion in the Redstone restaurant. After all is said and done, the Feng family is one of the most reputable families in Fenglin City. If we don't take act, how do you think the other families will view ours? Feng Zhenyuan peacefully explained. However, I've heard that Zero Wing's development in God's domain is quite impressive, and the virtual combat platform you've recently set up has been performing considerably well. The Feng family has interests in these aspects, so we plan to invest in Zero Wing. In return, the Feng family only wants 51% of Zero Wing's shares. Not only will Zero Wing receive a massive capital deposit from the Qilin Corporation to boost its development, but you'll also have access to the various dojos and training centers in Fenglin City for recruiting and nurturing talented players. What are your thoughts? After Feng Zhenyuan's statement, the room fell silent. Xiao Yu stared at the man in astonishment. He had never thought that this colossal existence would be interested in Zero Wing enough to offer full investment. Although many guilds in God's domain were supported by major corporations, that support was limited. No corporation would invest so much in a single guild. If Zero Wing had the Qilin Corporation's full support, both Zero Wing and the Heaven's Rumble Training Center's development speed would undergo a qualitative transformation. However, Feng Zhenyuan's demand for 51% of the organization's shares would set him up as Zero Wing's owner. Gentle Snow paled instantly. She hadn't expected the Feng family's appetite to be this large. This is the friendliest threat I've ever heard, Xuefeng said, chuckling. To put it simply, Feng Zhenyuan wanted to become Zero Wing's majority shareholder in exchange for letting the previous insult slide. Do you intend to make an enemy of the Feng family? Feng Zhenyuan asked. Frowning. Coldly, he continued. Or do you think that you can lead Zero Wing and Heaven's Rumble against the Feng family with your martial prowess alone? As Feng Zhenyuan's tone chilled, the intensity of his aura spiked. The room grew heated as if a volcano had begun to erupt. A neutralizing grandmaster. Lei Bao exclaimed from behind Xuefeng, stunned by the revelation. Although Lei Bao had felt substantial pressure from Feng Zhenyuan and knew this man was no ordinary person, he hadn't expected the head of the Feng family to be a neutralizing grandmaster. It was impressive enough for one family to nurture a single neutralizing grandmaster. A family could prosper for an entire century with just one such individual. The Feng family only enjoyed its current status today due to Old Man Feng, Feng Zhenyuan's father. And yet, Feng Zhenyuan exposed the fact that he was also a neutralizing grandmaster, which meant the Feng family had two such individuals. When Xiao Yu heard Lei Bao's statement, he was just as stunned. With two neutralizing grandmasters, it had enough influence to force the various families, dojos, and training centers in Fenglin City to obey its every command, regardless of the rest of the Feng family's martial prowess. Feng Mingyu, who reclined on a sofa, sneered at Xuefeng. Everyone had assumed the Feng family's rise was due to his grandfather. They also believed that once his grandfather reached his 101st birthday, the family would crumble. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. However, the public didn't realize that the Feng family's foundations had grown since his grandfather had led the family. If they hadn't, his grandfather would never have passed control of the family to his father, Feng Zhenyuan. Feng Mingyu acknowledged that he was no match for Xuefeng, but the tricks Xuefeng had played against him wouldn't work with his father. When he faced his father, Feng Mingyu didn't even have the heart to resist. He had no hope of contending with his father's inhuman fitness in a direct confrontation. How can I know if I don't try? Xuefeng nonchalantly replied. Good. Let me see if you're as strong as you claim. Feng Zhenyuan's fist then shot toward Xuefeng with exceptional speed and grace. Chapter 2301. Rivaling a grandmaster so fast. Lei Bao's expression turned sour as he watched Feng Zhenyuan move. He hadn't expected the man to attack without hesitation. Feng Zhenyuan had none of the magnanimity of a martial arts grandmaster. Feng Zhenyuan's punch was so fast that the human body had practically no time to react. Come. However,
Feng had reacted as Fang Zhenyuan's fist had begun to move. Neutralizing Grandmaster's mental processing speed was far faster than an ordinary human's. Their sensitivity to danger was easily 10 times sharper than an ordinary person's, as well. They could sense an incoming attack before the enemy even moved, which was why neutralizing Grandmasters were so frightening. Since this was his first time fighting a neutralizing Grandmaster in the real world, Feng decided to greet the hit with a punch of his own, rather than dodge. Like Fang Zhenyuan's punch, Feng lacked any flowery movements. It was standard, textbook punch. Suicidal bastard. Fang Mingyu could not help but grin as he watched. Fang Mingyu had recognized that Feng was weaker than he was during their clash in the Redstone restaurant. Not to mention his father. His father might be old, but thanks to modem technology like the life potion, he maintained his peak condition even at his age. In fact, Fang Zhenyuan's body wouldn't even begin to deteriorate for another 2 decades. The fact that Feng chose to face the hit head-on was suicidal. Boom! As the two fists collided, the air between them compressed and shattered, the shockwave cracking the marble ground beneath them. The room shook slightly, and even Bai Qingxue stumbled backward. After the clash, Feng and Fang Zhenyuan took a step back, the ground under their feet slightly sunken. How is this possible? Fang Mingyu stared at Feng with wide, shocked eyes when he saw the younger man completely unharmed from the exchange. 10 days ago, Feng had been weaker than he was. Yet now, Feng had taken his father's punch without suffering any damage. He stopped it? The outcome greatly shocked Lei Bao, as well. He knew that Feng was a neutralizing grandmaster, but Fang Zhenyuan had walked this path for decades now. Regardless of when he had become a neutralizing grandmaster, his fitness was inhuman. Feng should have no hope of matching the older man in this regard. Moreover, Fang Zhenyuan's punch had been out of this world. Lei Bao was sure that if he had tried to take that hit head-on, he would have either died or been severely injured. In truth, even Feng was relatively surprised. He hadn't considered that he'd improve so massively after his training in the Tower of Four Gods. Not only had his fitness rapidly improved, but he had also substantially increased his control. He had successfully implemented some of the sword's transmigration's principles in his punch, diverting a portion of Fang Zhenyuan's strength downward. This was why he had been able to face that hit without injury. If this fight had taken place after Feng had just broken through to the Grandmaster realm, he would have definitely taken damage from Fang Zhenyuan's punch. Is this the strength of neutralizing Grandmasters? Bai Qingxue thought as she gazed down at the shattered floor and felt the stifling auras radiating off of Feng and Fang Zhenyuan. This seemed more like a fight between mechanical beasts, rather than a fight between humans. It was no wonder why Fenglin City's various families were so afraid of the Fang family. Meanwhile, Feng and Fang Zhenyuan didn't continue to fight after exchanging hits. Instead, they took a moment to observe each other in silence. Excellent. To reach such a standard at such an age, it's no wonder why you're so confident, Fang Zhenyuan said as he calmly watched Feng. Smiling, he continued, however, how long do you think you can protect Zero Wing by yourself? You know that more than one organization is targeting Zero Wing. Partnering with the Fang family is your best option. Zero Wing can only contend with these organizations with the Fang family's resources and strength. If you refuse, only death will await you. You don't need to concern yourself with such matters, Mr. Fang, Feng said. Zero Wing will take care of its own. Zero Wing had already grown powerful enough that not even first-rate guilds were a match for it, yet as luck would have it, Zero Wing didn't have a powerful background. It was only natural that other organizations would have set their sights on the guild. It was why Feng was trying to accelerate the Heaven's Rumble Training Center's development. However, he hadn't thought that a power like the Fang family would try to annex Zero Wing so soon. Is that so? Fang Zhenyuan laughed. I hope you can keep this kind of confidence when the time comes. Fang Zhenyuan then turned and left the reception room, showing no intention of trying to persuade Feng further. Fang Mingyu and the girl in the red dress stood from their seats, following after the older man. After leaving Zero Wing's main headquarters and climbing into his luxury car, Fang Zhenyuan turned to the young woman, who had remained silent, with a serious expression. Shirhan, I'll contact Fenglin City's dojos and training centers later. I'll leave Heaven's Rumble's virtual combat platform to you, Fang Zhenyuan said coldly. With your position in mythology, you should have no problem suppressing a guild like Zero Wing, correct? If a guild wished to develop in God's domain, It needed sufficient manpower. Heaven's Rumble had attracted quite a few talented fighters with the virtual platform it had set up, and as long as they dealt with the platform, Zero Wing's development in the game would stagnate. Once they had suppressed Zero Wing from every angle, it would only be a matter of time before Xueqi submitted to the Feng family. Of course, mythology is one of the top 5 super guilds of God's domain. However, mythology is based on the Western continent, and there's no connection between the East and West continents yet. It's not possible to connect to Easter players' data via the virtual combat platform yet. I'll need some time before I can lead a team to the Eastern continent, the red-dressed girl named Feng Sherhan said, smiling. Once we cross over, we'll trample over Zero Wing's experts. Guilds on the 2 continents have different areas of focus, and the difference between combat standards is massive. All right. I'll leave the situation to you. Mingyu will help you where he can, Feng Zhenyuan said, nodding. After Feng Zhenyuan's group had left, an uproar rose in Zero Wing's headquarters. Zero Wing's members knew about the conflict between the guild and the Feng family. Xueqi had caused quite the scene in the Redstone restaurant, after all, and as a result, the situation with the Feng family weighed on everyone's minds. Since the Feng family had left without achieving anything, Zero Wing's players breathed a sigh of relief. Hallmaster, now that the Feng family has revealed that it has 2 neutralizing grandmasters, Fenglin City's dojos and training centers will side with the family. Some of the dojos and training centers we've signed partnership agreements with will likely pull out of the deals. I'm afraid that it won't be possible to recruit a large number of talented combatants quickly, Xueqi said. Moreover, the Feng family will most likely work with other dojos and training centers to compete with our pricing. If they don't want to work with us, so be it. Our priority is to set up more virtual combat platforms, so I want you to try to set up some small-scale training centers around the city, Xueqi replied. He, too, understood the influence the Feng family would command with 2 neutralizing grandmasters. Furthermore, the Feng family had the Qilin Corporation's support. Zero Wing was utterly outmatched when it came to strength and financial resources. However, the virtual combat platform would become the mainstream platform for combat in the future. As long as the Heaven's Rumble Training Center developed its virtual combat platforms, it had some chance of competing with the Feng family. Developing the platforms won't be a problem, but with our current finances, setting up the training centers will be, Xueqi said helplessly. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Although Zero Wing had recently earned quite a few credits through Stone Forest Town, setting up a large enough virtual combat platform would cost a lot of money. The setup for a platform in the training center was already a huge burden on Zero Wing's finances. Trying to set up more was simply unrealistic. Relax. Zero Wing is quite rich right now, Xueqi said, smiling. I'll start searching for suitable locations then, Xueqi said, his eyes glowing with excitement upon hearing Xueqi's response. If they had sufficient capital, Heaven's Rumble wouldn't have to worry about its development even without Fenglin City's various dojos and training centers. After discussing the training center's future with Xueqi, Xueqi returned to God's domain. Other guilds might struggle to earn money in God's domain at this stage of the game, but that wasn't an issue for Zero Wing, especially after capturing the Northern Fortress. After all, the Gravity Mountain Range was becoming a hub for various wealthy powers. Chapter 2302, Renting Shops. Gravity Mountain Range, Northern Fortress. As soon as Xueqi came online, he was greeted by the sight of a very busy street. As he walked through the city streets, he saw large groups of guild players running toward the fortress's hotels, reserving all of the rooms and turning them into temporary residences for their guilds. At this point, the Northern Fortress was just as prosperous as an ordinary city. Xueqi could already tell that the Northern Fortress would become the center of attention in the Gravity Mountain Range. Meanwhile, independent players crowded outside of Zero Wing's residence, eager to apply to join the guild. They all wanted to take advantage of the benefits the guild's residence offered, and because of this, Blackie and the others were swamped with work. Guild leader, you're back. When Aqua Rose, who was busy organizing documents in the guild leader's office, noticed Xueqi enter the room, she worriedly asked, how did the matter with the Feng family go? Although she wasn't in Fenglin City, she was aware of the Feng family's position there. Zero Wing had just established itself in Fenglin City, and if the Feng family decided to target the guild, it would affect Zero Wing's in-game development and in the real world, especially now that the various guilds understood the importance of dojos and training centers. Many large guilds in God's domain had already partnered with dojos and training centers by this point, with some guilds even opening their own. With a dojo or training center, not only could they nurture their own talented individuals, but they could also recruit new players to bolster their strength. With the country's various training centers and dojos aligning themselves with God's domain's large guilds, Zero Wing would have a difficult time establishing itself in new cities. Hence, Zero Wing would have to rely on the Heaven's Rumble Training Center in Fenglin City to pump new blood into the guild.
Everything's fine.
Negotiations to purchase Zero Wing simply broke down, Xueqi said, waving his hand.
Isn't that really bad?
Xueqi's nonchalant attitude exasperated Aqua Rose. The Feng family owns the Qilin Corporation and is based in Fenglin City. The Feng family won't have any trouble targeting us. All it would need to do is contact Fenglin City's dojos and training centers and instruct them to compete with our prices. If that happens, nobody will visit the Heaven's Rumble Training Center. The Heaven's Rumble Training Center was Zero Wing's main source of new, talented players right now. If nobody visited the training center, Zero Wing wouldn't have anyone new to recruit. Moreover, the Feng family could easily afford to poach Heaven's Rumble's new members by offering them a high payout. Not only would the Feng family cut off Zero Wing's supply of new blood, but the Heaven's Rumble would become a burden on Zero Wing's finances, as well. Keeping the training center open every day cost a huge sum of money.
Relax.
Zero Wing isn't the same guild it used to be. The Feng family overestimates itself if it thinks it can annex us, Xueqi said, chuckling. How is the construction for the fortress's shops coming along? They're done, but if we only rent the shops, we won't be able to earn much. As a medium fortress, the northern fortress can only accommodate so many players at once, Aqua Rose reported. Very few powers visiting the fortress have expressed any interest in the shops. Most people are asking to rent the hotels long-term, instead. The various major powers were typically quite interested in obtaining shops, but only if there was enough traffic. It would likely be quite difficult to rent the fortress's shops for a high price with the northern fortress's maximum player population. Furthermore, the number of shops in the fortress couldn't compare to those in a guild city. Based on God's domain settings, fortresses could only house a limited number of shops. A small fortress only had room for 100 shops, while a medium fortress could contain 240 shops. In comparison, a basic city could easily hold more than 1,000 shops. As long as they're done, I'm satisfied, Xueqi said, chuckling. See to the necessary preparations and announce that the northern fortress will begin to lease its shops. The bid for each shop will start at 5 million credits per month, and will only lease 200 shops in total. First come, first served.
Guild leader you.
Aqua Rose stared at Xueqi as if he had gone mad. If they couldn't even lease Zero Wing City's shops for 5 million credit per month, how were they supposed to rent those in the northern fortress, which had less than 500,000 players right now? And Xueqi's high price was only the starting bid. Just get it done. When the time comes, you'll understand, Xueqi said, not bothering to explain further. Fortresses in neutral maps were far more profitable than guild cities in God's domain. Guild towns and cities couldn't be constructed in many neutral maps due to their environments, and players would have to rely on fortresses to rest. Most of God's domain's players were also independent players, and when they obtained items they didn't need, they almost always sold them in their favored rest areas. Naturally, shops were the best platform for guilds to purchase and store these items, especially the items that couldn't be stored in one's bag space. Aside from purchasing and storing materials and items, neutral fortresses shops had a hidden benefit. They could conduct transactions with wandering merchant NPCs and purchase specialty items. Wandering merchants would visit a neutral fortress as long as it had enough security, and these NPCs frequently conducted business with individual players and shops. However, wandering merchants would only offer to sell their specialty items to shops. One such specialty item was the Advanced Wanderer's Camp. With this item, a team could set up a temporary resting area in a neutral map. Although each Advanced Wanderer's Camp could only be used 3 times, and each use had a 1-day duration, it would help a team fully recover their stamina and concentration without cutting their exploration short to return to a city or fortress. The Advanced Wanderer's Camp was an absolute treasure to exploration teams. Sometimes, if players were lucky, they would even encounter wandering merchants that were interested in selling super rare mini mobile camp. Unlike the Advanced Wanderer's Camp, the mini mobile camp was permanent.
It could only accommodate 100 players at a time, but a team could use it indefinitely. It only cost a few magic crystals for each activation. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The smallest fortress wandering merchant NPCs would visit was a medium fortress, which was why the various powers had fought so desperately to capture neutral medium fortresses and larger during Xuefeng's previous life. Every neutral medium fortress was a goldmine and definitely worth waging a war to acquire. To increase their chances of developing in neutral maps, the various powers wouldn't spare any cost when renting a fortress's shops. As long as one owned a medium fortress or larger in a neutral map, they wouldn't have to worry about needing a source of income, especially if that fortress was the Northern Fortress. Currently, it was the only fortress in the Gravity Mountain range that had returned scrolls, and there were plenty of unexplored ruins in the Gravity Mountain range. Zero Wing wouldn't need to worry about no one renting the fortress's shops. After verifying Xuefeng's instructions, Aqua Rose informed the public that the Northern Fortress's shops were available for rent.